A lively crowd gathers around a kiosk. From there, amid the crowds and shouts, a young man asks his assistant for some items. The flustered girl hands him the order and thanks him for waiting. After selling everything, they celebrate and start tallying the profit from the sales. After withdrawing the capital, they collected 1,600,000 yen. Amazed, the little girl compares Shiro's sales skills to a magician. Embarrassed, Shiro says she's exaggerating. In another scene set in modern Japan, Rishiru stands in a forest and sees a portal into his bedroom. He never mentions that behind him is a fantasy city and ahead is the room with his grandmother's altar. A young man tells how he came to the house his grandmother left him. Opening the closet in the altar room, he found a portal to another world. Shiro closes the door, telling himself it was just a hallucination caused by stress from his old toxic job. Opening the closet again, he is stunned to discover it was real. His grandmother had kept a secret, and the young man remembers she disappeared 7 years ago and was later declared dead by the government. As a child, Shiro always asked about the secret. She said she would tell him when he was older. Before revealing it, the elderly woman died, but she left a letter with instructions beside a photo. In the letter, she apologizes for not telling him and admits she was a witch from a world called Rufagio. She reveals the closet linked to Rufatio, a world of magic and other powers, filled with fierce monsters and races beyond humans, and the old witch left a ring that let him understand that world's language. She tells Sherry to read the 2 books behind the altar. Finding the ring among the books, the young man can't read the writing, but his grandmother's voice echoes in his mind, and he remembers to play with the ring. Excited, he discovers he can now understand what is written. Reading the book of voice in his head, he learns he has gained the skill equivalent exchange. Startled, Shiro looks around for someone. He realizes he is an alum. As in a game, he gains a new ability called inventory. Unsure what to do, the young man wonders if he should go. Soon he remembers his grandmother, saying he would understand everything when he arrived. After preparing, he decides to go the next day. He offers a prayer for his grandmother. The next morning, Shiro sets out, excited for his adventure. After a long walk, he reaches a city. You can see warriors, cat girls, and mages walking the streets. The city excites him, and the walk has made him hungry. A skewer stall draws his eye, and Shiro, curious, asks what kind of meat it is. The vendor says it's a horned rabbit that costs only 3 bronze coins. The young man apologizes, saying he has no money, and the vendor is left frustrated. At the thought of the skewer, his mouth waters for the tasty treat. He remembers having 4,200 yen left from the change at the convenience store and wishes he could buy the skewers with it. In that instant, a magic circle appeared in his hand, and a coin materialized where yen had been. Impressed, the young man runs to the food stall and asks the vendor if the coin that appeared is bronze. The vendor confirms it, finds it odd, and concludes Shiro must be a foreigner. Shiro celebrates his ability to make equal exchanges, then orders 3 skewers. He eats the food with humble eagerness. However, they are disappointed because the seasoning is unremarkable. The young man starts testing by converting the coins back into yen. Realizing what he could do with his ability, he can exchange the coins at any time. He concluded he could become rich. Continuing his tests, he converts larger sums and produces a silver coin. Back at the food stall, he asks if he can pay with it. The vendor says there is not enough change. Shiro goes over what happened and adds up his money. He makes a turn to explore the area. Until he gets to the market, Shiro is eager to speak with the people there, especially the cat girls. He notices his modern clothes are drawing attention. A little girl approaches him with flowers. Nervous, she hesitates when Shiro asks the price. As he considers the price, she becomes even more nervous. Reducing her offer, the young man picks a yellow flower and pays the girl 3 bronze coins, surprising her. He tells her that for that price, he expects some information and someone asks her to introduce herself. The little girl says her name is Aina. Shiro also introduces himself to her. Based on the information from ANA, the city turns out to be Menorich, a district of the Jalum Kingdom. There are 3 types of currency, with bronze worth 100 yen, silver worth 10,000 yen, and gold worth 1 million yen. Average salary in that world was 8 silver coins a month, and few people had gold coins. Doing business without government authorization was not allowed, even for children like Anna. Shiro buys additional flowers from the little girl, leaving her even more shocked. Reassuring him, she says a decoration with just one flower would look strange. Aina is deeply grateful. Make sure it says his grandmother will be happy with those beautiful flowers. His words about the flowers move her. Shuru asks her to take him to the government office. Aina eagerly points the way. Aindav announces their arrival. The little girl excitedly points to a large building. Shuru grows anxious and asks whether they will have any trouble because he is a foreigner, but the little girl reassures him that everyone there is kind. As he falters while speaking to the staff, her sudden arrival startles him, and an old elf with a stern expression begins to question him. She gives him a form and shows him how to fill it out. The option is to be a street vendor, paying a fee of 10 bronze coins per day to carry and sell his goods on the street. A vendor charging the same fee sets up a stall at a fixed location. Finally, the shop owner can be hired for 3 silver coins per day. The elf explains the shop requires a contract of at least 10 days. Sherry chooses the second option and gives the form to the employee, who finds his name strange. He says it's very cheap, then quickly regrets it because he doesn't know the prices in this world. Yale's expression softens, and she agrees it's cheap because the mayor regulates prices, wishing the young man success in his business. Shuru thanks Aina and admits he is surprised things worked out, then thanks the little girl and tells her he will return to the market. Aina looks disappointed to part from him but agrees timidly, lowering her head as she says goodbye. Noticing he's walking the wrong way, she shouts that it's the wrong direction, clearly flustered, and points the other way. When they get to the market, the little girl asks what Shuru plans to sell. He adopts a triumphant expression and starts to announce the chosen merchandise, then admits he hasn't thought of anything, and seeing the young man on Shur in Na smiles and suggests he sell gear for adventurers since many pass through the city. At a girl's suggestion, Shuru looks around and sees a sorceress, a warrior, and soldiers. Aino explains this is happening because many monsters are appearing in the forest. Suspecting the monsters come from that forest, the young man imagines a terrible creature attacking him with its tentacles. After thinking about the girl's suggestion, he listens as she sadly explains that because of it she can't sell many flowers. Her face brightens again, pleased that Shuru bought several flowers, and she says with a big smile that she's glad to have met him. Anna's words embarrass the young man, and she offers to guide him through the market. They visit a lantern shop where the shopkeeper looks like a lantern, then go to a sleeping bag shop served by a vendor in a cat cloak, and also visit a knife shop and a rope shop where a woman in a bunny outfit attends them while tying up a man. Shuru is amazed at the variety of shops and goods there. The little girl, with a triumphant look, confirms she was right and gives a small punch to her chest. She then punches too hard, starts coughing from the shock, and the young man becomes worried. Taking Shira's hand, she points out the shops around them and he looks at her fondly, thinking she will make a great wife one day. As Anna talks on without stopping, the young man stays lost in thought, hoping for a beautiful wife and daughter soon. The girl interrupts him with an eerie question about what he plans to sell, and he leans in to whisper in her ear, but she looks confused when she hears the answer, unsure what he means. The next morning the young man stretches, eager to prepare his products. The girl appears excited to Gria. When Shuru asked whether she planned to sell flowers that day, she said she had woken early to pick them. The young man tells her the flowers are beautiful and that she's going to sell a lot, and Aina's face lights up as she says she's selling them to buy medicine for her mother. Then she says goodbye energetically, and he replies he'll see her later. Running with her basket, Anna offers the flowers but bumps into someone and falls to the ground. Tears in his eyes, he cheered for the girl and promised to do his best too. Out of nowhere, the first customer appears and asks what he is selling. Puzzled by the box Shura gave him, the customer asks if it's some kind of craft. Shura says it's a matchbox, and inside is a small stick that makes fire. The adventurer says he's never heard of that and can't believe a small piece of wood could start a fire. Shuru then strikes a match on the box to show how it works, producing a small flame, and the customer watching closely is initially confused. Startled, he shoves, completely shocked by what he saw, setting off a commotion around him. Thrown to the ground, the adventurer asks admiringly how Shiro pulled that off, while Shiro holds a lit match in front of him. The young man shrugs and replies indifferently that he has never seen anything like it. Shuru warns he will show it one more time and starts a countdown, and when it ends, he lights the match again, surprising the adventurer. A crowd gathers at the adventurer's reaction, and everyone is stunned. Some call it witchcraft, magic, or a mysterious device, but no one has ever seen anything like it. A young man shows how easy his product is to use, and customers begin testing the matches with astonishment. A satisfied Shuru smiles, thinking about how everything is going according to plan. Visiting the market with Anna, he realized people here didn't know what matches were, so when he went back to his world, he bought boxes to sell. An old elf says he hasn't seen anything like it in 250 years. A lizard man agrees eagerly, and the adventurer from earlier recognizes it's truly incredible. Lighting a fire with a stone takes a long time, and magical items are hard to carry because they are heavy. Lighting a fire takes a long time without a witch's help. Shiru shares the smug expression. He begins his speech like a tech icon, unveiling a cutting-edge product, claiming people no longer have to face these problems because he brought them freedom. A young man in a Steve Jobs-style outfit holds a small box as the crowd goes wild. A young man asks who he would like to buy and someone immediately offers, but they are suddenly interrupted. The adventurer, wearing a serious expression, asks how much the matches will cost. Onlookers begin to question and assume they must be expensive. Still, Shiro is eager for this moment. A man asked the adventurer how much he thought they cost. After a moment, the customer said 80 bronze coins. The young man smiled. Shura considers two options: sell it as a luxury item or sell it cheaply to profit from high demand. At the first auction, he would earn a large profit on each sale, but only a few buyers could afford it. In the second option, many people could buy it, but his profit might fall. He announces enthusiastically that each box contains 40 matches and offers a special opening price of 5 bronze coins per box. Everyone is surprised, but they immediately start placing orders. Shuru warns them to be careful because the matches might get wet. In the end, the young man sells to over 100 people, leaving only an old man, and everything is sold out. Apologizing, he promises the old man a number for the queue the next day, but the man is offended and says he's only 120 years old. Shiri lies down completely exhausted, thinking about how there were so many people and how there would be even more the next day. Clouds gather as the young man doubts he can handle it, and seeing a flower fall, he thinks he doesn't need any more. The scene shifts to Anna as she bends to pick up a fallen flower. Still enthusiastic, the girl keeps offering her flowers and saying they are cheap when someone suddenly shouts her name. Turning around, she sees Shuru and, surprised, asks about the shop, and the young man says he finished selling and closed up earlier. Eamon smiles for him, but when Shuru asks about her, the little girl blushes and hides her basket of flowers. Her face flushed, she says she doesn't know, and while wondering why the flowers aren't selling, tears begin to well up in her eyes. Still upset, Shuru asks if she's okay. Wiping away her tears, she tells him she's fine and runs off to sell her flowers. He grabs her arm and asks her to wait while she looks confused and teary, asking her to listen. Shouting, the girl asks what he said, and he asks her to help him the next day, and she asks if everything is really okay. Shira tells her to stop saying he is asking for her help because she can really help him. Offering to pay for her service, he watches the girl lower her head. Beaming with excitement, she says she'll take care of it because she's thrilled to work with Shuro. The young man thanks her, but Anna says it's not necessary since she hasn't sold a single flower. Holding his hand, she says she is the one who owes him so much. As he watches Inna fondly, because she thanked him so sincerely, he thinks he will have to work hard. Cheryl asks whether they can meet again the next day. The little girl, still holding his hand, replies in an eerie voice that they can. After confirming no one is around, they say their goodbyes, and the young man looks around to see if anyone is watching. Not wanting to be discovered, he opens a portal to his world. He says the closet's portal can be opened from anywhere, but worries people will spread rumors about it. The young man steps through the portal and returns home. The moment he steps through the portal and reaches his house, he checks his earnings. By using the equivalent exchange, she converts the money into yen and he calculates he made 215,550 yen from that day's sales and is stunned, comparing it to the salary from his old job. Shiro imagines that if things keep going like this, he'll never have to work again and will spend his time playing console games and reading manga, but he quickly returns to reality and prepares for the next day. Cut to Shiro at the supermarket, searching for the matchboxes. Finding them, he sees survival matchboxes resistant to wind and water and says he didn't even know they existed. Grabbing several boxes, he hopes to sell them to adventurers for a profit. The supermarket cashier finds it odd and wonders whether she's serving a crazy person. With his hands full, the young man realizes he forgot how much work it would be to carry everything home. Bettany has an idea and decides that if he can use the equivalent exchange ability in his world, he can use his other ability as well. Carrying the shopping to a secluded spot, he activates his spatial storage. A tear opens in the fabric of reality. Confident of the surprise, he tosses the packages into the rift and celebrates his own pocket dimension when he's done. The young man remembers having to put his things in a backpack before, and his back still hurts from that old job, so he thinks he would not have been able to carry everything he bought if he had to put it in a bag. Shocked, the young man realizes he can also read the information on items stored inside a large magic circle and begins to wonder if his abilities have no limits and what his grandmother is doing. Shuru looks at his hands, thinking he will never have to carry anything again. He will sell matchboxes for 4 more days and then decide what else to sell. Confidently lifting his arm, the young man says that with these powers he will become rich. A little girl points at him and tells her mother the strange man is talking to himself again. Her mother scolds the girl for pointing at strangers, and Shuru, embarrassed, keeps quiet and goes home. The day begins with Anna in a small, plain brick house, and the little girl says goodbye to her mother. A vase of flowers sits on the windowsill while the girl's mother lies in bed, and the woman asks whether Anna is not taking the flowers with her. Smiling, the little girl replies that she isn't, because she's going to help make sure she gets her shot. At his grandmother's house in the real world, Shiro asks for her blessing in front of her altar. Stepping through the portal, he is eager to begin the day. Aina walks through the city with a smile. Shuru catches up to her, greets her, and apologizes for being late. The girl says she just arrived, but holds back and finally admits she waited a little while. After all, she tells Shiro the customers had already begun lining up. He only then notices several people already gathered around the shop. Aina turns to him, eager to start, but the young man says he still has a few things to set up. Suddenly, he noticed that so many people were waiting to buy from his shop that they were blocking foot traffic to the other stores. The young man realizes this is bad because he remembers his old job. Another shop owner mentions the line that formed, and Shiro agrees to organize it. A closer look shows the man is the vendor from the skewer stall. Arriving at Shuru, the man said he'd heard about the matchsticks but couldn't believe they meant him. Seeing the line but no customers being served, he asks the young man if there's a problem. Shuru then explains the issue with the other shops. The merchant understands, and his companion offers Shira their stall for free today because it's a bit farther away. A young man asks if that will be a problem, and the woman says it is not since they decided to take a break. Shuru thanks her, and in Na's eyes sparkle. The young man asks whether the woman is the merchant's wife, then quickly denies it and says she is his sister. The woman winks at Sharu, who is shocked because they look nothing alike. She is a beautiful girl. Shuru and Aina move across a small map toward the roasted meat shop. Upon arrival, the pair quickly organizes the products. Shiro teaches Aina which sizes and items to sell, and Aina says to leave it to her though she looks overwhelmed. He asks if she is okay since she seems nervous, and they open the shop anyway. A huge line is outside. Staff apologize for the delay and say they will start serving. Shiro asks customers with priority tickets to step forward and gives Anna instructions for taking orders. Slightly flustered, the Grove follows Shiro's orders. I'm not as amazed because the boxes sold quickly. Many people are still in line to buy. Shiro calls the next customer while the girl watches everything. Amazed, she thinks this must be the magic of sales. They must close soon, and the young man apologizes to the customers because the shop has run out of stock. I can't believe it, Shiro says it was all because of her help. He also thanks the skewer stall owners and starts counting the coins they earn. He is stunned and says he thought yesterday's sales would bring 200,000 yen, but after 3 hours, they have taken in 15 million yen. He retracts his earlier comment after calculating it's almost 490,000 yen an hour and wonders whether millionaires earn that much. To avoid being robbed, the young man decides to leave, but when he puts the backpack on, he leans under its weight. Finding it too heavy, he considers using his pocket dimension, but doesn't want anyone to see. Seeing it won't work, he gives Anna a bag of coins as payment for her work, and the little girl thanks him warmly. Shiro pats the girl's head, suggests she buy a gift for her mother, and tells her she was a great help. Anna says she should be the one thanking him for letting her work at the shop, but Shiro interrupts. He tells her to stop thanking him, says she earned it through hard work, and winks. She pouts and insists she still wants to thank him, while Shiro laughs. Her stomach growls at that moment, making her very embarrassed. Opening a bag, the young man says they didn't get a break, and invites the girl to eat with him. Shiro pulls some sandwiches from the bag and Aina, mouth-watering, asks if it is bread. From the first bite, the girl is captivated, calling it delicious as her eyes light up while she eats, and Shiro is glad she liked the food. As they eat, a wound draws closer. She asks for a moment of his time, a tall young woman with long hair, well-dressed. Having heard rumors about the matches, she asks whether Shiro was the one selling them. He says it was, but everything has already been sold. She says she did not come in to buy. Putting her hand to her chest, she says she came because of him. Karen Sankarika introduces herself as the city's mayor. Karen says she's late and clearly looks very healthy. It was a shock when the mayor herself came to find him, unable to believe what was happening. He's surprised the mayor is such a young, beautiful woman because he expected someone strong and muscular. Awkwardly, the young man asks what she wants to talk about, while Enno watches closely. Karen thanks him for having a merchant of Shiro's caliber doing business in the city and bows deeply. Shiro replies that he should be the one to thank her for letting him sell his products, and the woman says he is very humble. She says most of the merchants there are stubborn, and the young man looks confused. Suddenly she turns and says he can help her. Flustered, they start talking while Anna naps, dreaming about food. Karen says the city's remoteness makes merchants act like they're doing it a favor, charging high prices while local goods sell cheaply, leaving the city's finances unbalanced. The woman says she wants to fix this problem and listens with wide eyes. Excited, she adds that the city needs a market. After she finishes explaining, she feels awkward about the young man's reaction. The woman then hands him a key and says she wants him to be sure to keep it. Confused, he thinks it might be the key to her house, but finds it impossible since she's not offering him a harem. With a wink, Karen tells him it's the key to her house. Completely stunned, Shiro asks what's wrong, and he says it's nothing. Anna says she understands and announces the mayor wants to live with Shiro. When he asks what she means, the little girl repeats that the mayor wants to marry him. Karen grits her teeth and, embarrassed, denies it. Insisting she's not single or looking for someone, she denies it firmly. Composed, she returns to the topic and asks for a favor, but Shiro quickly interrupts. The young man asks if she is married and Karen immediately says she is not, her face flushing. Pointing to an empty house, she says Shiro can enter with a key and wants him to start selling his products on the first floor the next day. Sherwood was surprised and asked why, and as he expected, she said she had received complaints from other merchants. They said they couldn't sell because there was a long line at Shiro's shop. The young man knows it must be hard to work that way. Smiling triumphantly, Karen offers to show him around and says he doesn't have to decide anything right away. After walking through the city, they reach the house Karen offered and are left speechless. Shiro asks if everything is really okay as Ine runs around celebrating the shop, and the woman says she hopes they like it. She says she'd like to ask one more thing. Aina leans in and whispers to him that maybe the mayor wants to know if he has someone. Blushing, he shouts that he understands and that he doesn't have a girlfriend. That leaves the mayor embarrassed. Flustered, she says she wasn't going to ask that. The young man says he was only joking, but Karen still blushes, and the mayor then calms down, adopts a serious expression, and asks why he decided to sell his products in this city. She says sadly that it's a small town of only 500 people, and that the young man could earn more in other cities. Shiro admits she is right. He says he likes it there, and has only been in the city for 3 days. He knows Inna worked hard helping him in the shop, and that the mayor was very kind even though he is a resident. The young man tells her he loves the whole city because of that. Moved by his words, the mayor's face shows admiration. Memories of the people he met in Minorich return, and he thinks that, though he's from another world and hasn't seen any other cities, none are as friendly as that one. Karen places her hands over her heart, visibly moved, and thanks him sincerely for his words. Stunned, Aina tells Shiro he made a girl cry, and Shiro apologizes, saying it wasn't his intention. The mayor reaches out and says he can call her Karen. He shakes her hand and says she can call him Jashiru. Aina introduces herself, and they all shake hands. The mayor says he is pleased to meet them. A graph shows the young man's rise from matchstick seller to shop owner in just 3 days, and he imagines his grandmother in heaven celebrating, smiling and making the peace sign. The next day, he signs the 1-month contract for the new store. 5 days later, Shiryu announces the stock is sold out, and the customers are visibly surprised. Dressed in a suit and tie, the young man reviews his notes, puzzled because he thought he had sold enough to supply the whole city. Anna interrupts him to say she's finished cleaning the store. He tells her she can rest on the 2nd floor. Offering to help, she is told he declines because she has already worked enough today. The little girl looks disappointed. Shiro stretches back in his chair and arranges snacks on a tray. As he reaches to give it to Aina, he notices she is asleep. He watches the little girl as she sleeps. She begins speaking, mistaking him for her father, and Shiro tries to tell her that it's him. The girl asks for a hug. He lifts Anna into his arms. She's happy that her father finally hugged her. She says her mother does the same and then falls back into a deep sleep. The young man was surprised. Thinking he may have become a father, he wraps the girl in a blanket and tells her she can ask him for anything she needs. Anna still sleeps, smiling, and Shiro decides now to do his best to help the little girl. On the 6th day of sales at the shop, Shira gives Anna the day off. He's exhausted because he no longer remembers what it's like to work alone. At that moment, the mayor enters the shop. The young man tells her he's out of stock again. She says that's to be expected from a seller like him, but he says the real problem is that he is selling far more than the city's population. The mayor adds that she heard rumors. Some people have been reselling his products in other cities. He suggests limiting the number of products per customer. Karen looks serious and says she came to ask a favor. Seeing the gravity of the situation, the young man leads her to the upper floor and asks what her request is. Before answering, she asks if Shiro knows about the city's Adventurers Guild. The young man confirms the name is Silver Moon, and the mayor did not expect him to already know the city. Shura says it's because many of his customers are adventurers. The guild works like an outsourcing company. It takes requests from various clients and assigns them to adventurers who work as freelancers. The organization pays for successful missions, typically to kill monsters that threaten people, gather herbs and mushrooms for medicine, and handle other tasks. Karen then says that since he already knows it's easier, Silver Moon is the only guild in the city. As she talks about the guildmaster, Shiro cuts in, agitated. The guildmaster leads the organization and holds great authority. The young man suddenly stands and asks if something has happened to the guildmaster. After a pause, the mayor replies that he fled, clearly shocked. Karen says the guild has no money to pay the adventurers and worries they might leave the city, and the young man looks horrified and agrees it would be a major problem. The mayor then announces a plan, as she always does for complicated situations. She says the capital's Adventurers Guild wants to open a branch in the city. Out of consideration for Silver Moon, she has always refused. Given the situation, there are clear reasons to accept the offer from the capital. Karen thanks him warmly for his words, and when Shiro looks at her, he focuses on her body, turns away embarrassed, and says it's nothing. The mayor says that if she approves the request, representatives of the Capital Guild will visit to decide whether to open the branch. She asks Sherry to show the matchboxes to them. He says he doesn't mind showing them and asks what the problem is. Karen says she's never seen anything like it, even in the capital, and asks where he got it. Hesitating and apologizing for asking, she says that if the young man holds a monopoly on the product, the guild's interest will increase. The young man says he understands and must catch the Capital Guild's attention to succeed. Feeling awkward, the mayor is reassured by Shiro, who promises to bring something that will even surprise her. Kerrigan says he is very kind and shyly promises to return the favor. The next day, Aina is back at work. Noticing Shira's worry, she asks if everything is all right. Stretching, he focuses on bringing something that will catch the guild inspector's attention. Suddenly, he stands up decisively and tells the girl he needs to go to Karen's house. When he arrives at the residence, Karen falls silent at Shira's request and asks if he's serious, and says he wants to be an adventurer, requesting permission to join them. Hinarin asks whether he's serious about joining the adventurers on their missions. He says yes, because it's the only way he'll understand what they need. Keeping her serious expression, the mayor asked whether the young man understood the risks, since the forest is the only place adventurers go in that region. A brief view of the eastern forest reveals a large, shadowy wolf-like monster. Shiro says he knows and suggests he could be an herb-collecting adventurer, and Karen agrees it would be less dangerous. She wants to introduce him to some adventurers, but her relationship with the Silver Moon Guild is strained. Perrin remembers the guild's substitute master coming to her house the night before they crawled the shadows and begging her for money. Crying, he threw himself onto the floor. Surprised by the direct request, Shearer asked how much the guild needed, and Karen held up 10 fingers. After the young man asks if it is 10 coppers, she shakes her head, and when he asks about 10 silvers, the mayor refuses again, causing the sheriffs to shout in shock since they needed 10 gold coins, equivalent to 10 million yen. Scolding him for the noise, she lowers her head and says such an amount doesn't even exist in a small town like that, and she might have considered it if it were only a tenth. Rejecting the guild's request would make it harder to ask them for help later. The mayor looks at the inkstand on her desk. Deciding to write a letter, she gives it to Shuru and warns him not to expect much. Okay, head to the Silver Moon Guild. When he finally arrives, he's nervous because it's his first time there. Stepping inside, he finds a huge mess and is immediately attacked by an adventurer who knocks him to the ground. The warrior says he's new here and should greet his superiors. Shura tries to get up, saying he's not an adventurer but a merchant. The adventurer keeps intimidating him, saying that since he's a fancy merchant, he should charge for his punch. Shura sneaks away, convinced this could not happen, and slips in through a door. When he entered, he asked permission. Searching the room, he finds no one, then senses a presence, calls out to ask who is there, notices a counter in the room, and hears someone sobbing. Approaching, he says he has a letter from the mayor. Unaware at first, she only notices when a young man touches her shoulder. He asks permission and says he needs to speak with her. A young girl with rabbit ears and a long ponytail turns to face him. She startles when she doesn't recognize Shuru and shouts, asking who he is and how long he's been there. Shuru wonders if she is part of the guild. The girl keeps shouting, asking why he touched her, and while still screaming she wonders if Shuru likes her or something. Threatening, she says one word from the girl from the Silver Moon could summon 1,000 muscular men, and she pictures herself as a captain leading a revolutionary army. Shur snaps the girl out of her delusions and asks if anyone else is there. Sometimes there is, she replies. Still stubborn, the girl insists she can defeat him even when alone. Waving her arms, she says her punch can break rocks. A young man watches her with a disappointed look, thinking she will be a handful. Shuru cuts her off again to ask where to find the substitute master and to ask the girl to call him. Claiming she can, it turns out she is the guild's substitute master, leaving Shuru in disbelief. Mill, a rabbit girl, remembers how she became the new guild master. No other staff remained besides her. Another girl was present, disappearing after the previous master fled. Emil slams a bottle on the table and, completely drunk, tells Shuru that they were having an affair. Shuru vents that they did not know she had discovered it. It all began when they kissed in corners. In the end, they show their love in the master's room, and she starts cursing, wishing they would lose everything, be beaten, and sold into slavery. The medal says the former master smelled like a dog, and it tries to comfort her by saying she did her best. He asks if she's finished venting, and she says he's been very kind to listen to her complaints for a full 5 hours. Blushing, she begins to unbutton her shirt to return the affection, but Shuru asks what she's doing. Emil buttons her shirt back up and asks if there's something he should do, and the young man hands her the mayor's letter. The mill learns who it's from and starts firing off a string of insults. Shuru thinks his grandmother's ring might have malfunctioned because he couldn't understand it, says she must have been confused, and tells her the letter is from Ms. Karen, the mayor of Minorich. Emil keeps insulting the mayor, calling her foolish and cruel. Grabbing the letter from Shiru's hands, she says that if it is from Karen, it should be torn into pieces. Shuru cries out in shock, as the girl says love affairs and betrayals are the worst. The mill turns to him and asks what his connection to Karen is. She is upset because the mayor dismissed Silver Moon and invited a different guild. That explains why she finds the mayor so indecent. Just then, Karen sneezes in her office. The girl laments that she knelt at the mayor's feet, but Karen refused to lend her 10 gold coins, and the mill curses Karen, calling her mean. Shura tries to ease things by saying the amount was very large, and Karen must have had other concerns. Suddenly, the girl turns to confront Shuru about defending the mayor so much. She asks if the young man is interested in Karen. She tearfully admits she still loves the mayor and considers the mayor her best friend. Shura believes you should not insult people, especially your best friend. Mel wipes away her tears and says that without the money Vilda is doomed and she doesn't know what to do. Because she confided in him about her relationship with the mayor, the young man says he will forgive her for tearing up the letter. Shuru hands Emil a handkerchief and says he has a request for the guild. She stands, adjusts her hat, and asks what the request is. He tells her he wants to join an adventurer on a mission, and Emil agrees to submit the request, though it has never been done before. The young man asks whether arranging it is difficult, and she says she can think of only one suitable group. With 4 senior members, the fee will be fairly high. She announces the group's name, Azra Flash, as a long-haired sorceress, a tall middle-aged cleric, a young warrior, and a cat girl sit around a campfire in the forest. Emil calculates the fee carefully. Just before she can announce the exact 36 silver coins, Shuru interrupts and without hesitation places a heavy dive on the counter. Inside there are 100 silver coins, and he asks whether that will be enough, adding that he can pay more if needed. Her eyes widen in shock. She cannot hide her surprise at the unexpected sum, and without thinking, asks directly what Shira does for a living. Shiro answers directly that he is only a novice merchant. He then asks if she can proceed with the negotiation. The middle takes a deep breath and confirms that the amount more than covers the mission fee. A mysterious wink catches Sharu's eye, and he watches with growing interest, then is stunned when he sees Emil unbuttoning her clothes and blinks a few times in confusion. Meeting his eyes with a slight flush, the girl slowly starts taking off pieces of clothing, steps closer with a soft smile, and admits that despite her appearance she really likes rich people. Shuri looks away, uncomfortable, realizing he should have seen this coming. Belle moves a little closer with a mischievous gleam in her eye and asks if she can just call him Shuru. The young man immediately refuses, and she laughs, tilting her head and saying he's mean, but she does not mind. Then she adds that close friends can call her Emmy, the girl who brings them even closer. Leaning close, she whispers in his ear that Shuru is special because he is very rich, and Shuru's face turns completely red. Breaking free from Mimmel's grip, his heart racing, he steps away without looking back, anxious. All he can think about is the meeting with the adventurers the next day. Shuru sinks into thought, recalling the time since his arrival in this world, the moment he found the portal in the wardrobe, the day he met Ina, and everything that followed. Things moved quickly, and he ended up working at the shop the mayor provided. Confusion about the Silver Moon Guild returns to him, and he remembers his unexpected encounter with the substitute master Emil with a mix of curiosity and embarrassment. His train of thought breaks off. Anna pulls him back to reality. She looks worried and asks whether he really plans to close the shop for a while. Sheru nods and says it will only be for 3 days, during which she plans to live as an adventurer, and Aina listens and smiles, seeming to understand and saying it makes her happy because she also has personal matters to settle, and as Aina turns to leave, Sheru notices a small backpack on her back. Worried, he asks if something is wrong. Aina reassures him with a gentle smile and says it's nothing. Before walking away, she asks him to be careful. When the farewell ends, Shuru heads to the guild. He stops at the large wooden door. Reaching out to open it, he is surprised by a familiar figure. Emil appears without warning, says she has been waiting for him, and immediately urges him to come inside. Memories of the previous night flood his mind and he hesitates, his face heating as he quickly looks away, clearly embarrassed. Emil blinks at his reaction, asks why he's scared, and before he can answer, she assures him she won't eat him. With a gesture, she shifts the subject and introduces a group of adventurers. Silver rank is the guild's pride, and as Shuryu watches the group, he spots a young adventurer on a nearby bench who looks interested. Emil says the group will accompany Shuru on his mission. The mission involves collecting special herbs. 2 burly members stare directly at Sharu, and before Emil can introduce the leader, the young man who was sitting stands up. Smiling with excitement, he greets Shuru, saying it's been a while since they last saw each other. Shuru blinks several times, confused, and tries to remember the boy's face. She suddenly recognizes him. The adventurer was the first customer to buy the matches. Formally introducing himself, the boy says his name is Liar and that he is the group's leader. Lighter then points to an older man in clerical robes named Rolf, who approaches with a friendly smile, greets Shuru, and says he hopes they'll work well together. Liar shares an important detail that Rolf is a cleric, but also a skilled warrior armed mainly with a mace, and though calm, he should not be provoked. Next, he introduces another member of the group, a young girl with long hair who wears a cloak and a large witch's hat and holds a staff, named Neska, the group's sorceress. Liar prompts her to speak, and Neska, expressionless, murmurs that it's a pleasure to meet him. Smiling, Liar adds that the girl is quiet but gifted in magic. The only problem is she needs a bit more time to cast her spells. Neska lifts her staff and taps Liar lightly on the head. In a low voice, she tells him to mind his own business. Liar grumbles in irritation, retorting that he won't do it until she learns to cast faster. Nesko rolls her eyes and says she'll think about it. Before Liar can continue the introductions, someone at the back of the room performs a mid-air flip. A figure lands gracefully between Liar and Shuru with an agile movement and introduces herself enthusiastically, saying she is Kulfa as Shuru watches with curiosity. His gaze falls on her twitching feline ears, and unable to hide his curiosity, he asks if she belongs to the cat race. Liar's expression turns serious as he explains that many people dislike this race, including some guild clients who are averse to them. Kilful looks at the leader and says she finds this very strange. Shuru is outraged, unable to understand how anyone could hate such a cute race. Kilda hears this, smiles, strikes a pose, and says his words made her blush. Lyra proudly says she is the group's scout, responsible for protecting their escort, spotting traps, and handling other reconnaissance tasks. Kilfa adds that she fights with a bow and a dagger. Shurev says that's amazing, and Kilfa laughs confidently, saying he hasn't seen anything yet. Lyra looks at her seriously and adds that she's also the best at running away, and the cat gestures with her arms, saying he didn't need to mention that part. Clapping his hands, the guild leader asks if they can leave, looks at Shuru to see if he is ready, and Shuru replies eagerly that he is. Pleased by the young man's cheerful tone, Lyra says they are heading to the eastern forest. It walks up to a bar. She hesitates, opens the door, and a man who had been drinking stands and walks towards her. Recognizing her from another day, he reaches toward the little girl's face and says, as promised. The door closes at that moment. The monk warrior Rolf and the sorceress Neska watch with determined gazes. Scout Kilfa and the fearless leader of the warrior Lyre. Thinking about the journey that has just begun, he hopes nothing bad happens. The group walks single file along a narrow forest path with Kilfa leading, focused and alert to their surroundings. Noticing the young man's tension, Lyre reassures him that they will avoid encounters with monsters as much as possible, and he visibly relaxes and thanks Lyre as they continue walking. Lyra sighs and says searching for herbs is a boring job. Kilfer notes she has already found several, but Rolf warns the right herbs are rare and harder to find. The monk adds that once they find the herbs, the task will be complete. He's worried and Neska adds that it will soon be dark. Lyra thinks for a moment. They decide it's best to camp right there. Shuru is surprised and asks whether it's too early. Smiling, the warrior tells him that every adventurer must rest whenever possible because it is an important rule. Moved to tears, Shuru wishes he had heard this from his old boss, and Lyra then orders them to prepare camp, while Shara and Kilfa gather wood and Rolf chops down some trees with his axe. Lyra uses matches he bought to light the fire and tells Shuru they are extremely useful. The cleric says they are grateful for the sponsorship. Even Lyre jokes could earn him a fortune if he sold them in the capital. Shuru listens closely, and Rolf agrees but warns that if the notorious merchant association finds out, he'll be in trouble. Lyra laughs and says the cleric's predictions are usually accurate. Shuru is amazed at the accuracy. Nesko approaches, complaining he's hungry. Lyra nods and tells the group to eat because they've been walking all day. Shuru watches the sorceress eat a piece of bread. Looking at the menu of hard bread and dried meat, he cannot imagine how even adventurers used to the wild survive on such simple meals. Kilfa stares at him, asks if he's eaten yet, tears a piece of meat with her teeth, and offers it to him. Shura waves off her thanks and says he brought something with him as he opens his backpack. Lyre watches curiously as Rolf is stunned by the packages Shuru pulls from the back, while the group's leader can hardly believe it's food and everyone stares at the canned goods, instant noodles, and assorted cookies. Mesta swallows nervously as Lyre asks whether Shuru will eat it all himself, and the young man says he brought food for everyone, which surprises the group. Scherer says he's testing new products for his shop and wants their opinion. They pause for a moment. Lyre decides they are free samples. The group cheers. Everyone tries a treat. Lyre picks out a garment, while Killfoot eats a rice cake. Rolf tries a small bread roll and Neska bites into a chocolate bar. Everyone is amazed by the taste. Shuru watches them and sees that after the tasting, everyone enjoyed it. Kilful lies down with a full stomach, while Meska holds the sweets in bows, never forgetting the taste of chocolate. Rolf clutches a crucifix with tears in his eyes, calling it a divine gift. They sleep peacefully. Neska mumbles the word chocolate in her sleep. A liar approaches Shuru and tells him he should rest as well. Shura says he's not used to sleeping early, so Lyra invites him to talk. Studying his reflection in a cup of tea, the young man notices the adventurers do not use sleeping bags. Lyra explains they avoid them so they can move quickly if danger appears. He covers the sorceress with a blanket and says that in winter one blanket wouldn't be enough, but bringing too many would add extra weight. Sighing, he says that at times like this, he wishes he had a storage ability, and the other man chokes on his tea on hearing that. He asks about the spatial storage skill. Lara explains it is a rare trait present in only one person out of 100,000. He says an ancient dungeon holds a book with this skill. Shuru hides his reaction and thinks the book belongs to him. He asked the warrior what it would be worth if they found it. Later finds the question odd, but after thinking says that if it could store the value of a carriage, it would be enough to buy a mansion. Shuru pales as he agrees it makes sense. Lyre says it is more than he could ever gather in his entire life. The merchant feels relieved to have kept his secret and decides to test the limits of his ability later. Shore says he's going to sleep, but Lyra suddenly senses something. He draws his sword. Shuru looks confused and asks what is happening, but Lyra simply signals for silence. He rouses Kilfa and Rolf and asks Shuru to wake the sorcerers. Sensing something approaching, the leader warns everyone to get ready because a monster is about to attack. Shuru shakes a sleeping sorceress who is grumbling about chocolates and tells her to stop dreaming about sweets because it's an emergency. Nesca wakes and blinks, keeping her usual emotionless expression, while Kilfa sniffs the air and Lyre notices, asking if Kilfa sensed anything. The scout frowns and says this is bad. The monster must be downwind since she smells nothing unusual. Rolf concludes the creature is intelligent. Lyra tells Nesca to prepare his spell immediately. Still sleepy, she looks at him. A loud crash interrupts the conversation before she can react. Startled, the warrior spins and drops into a fighting stance, eyes wide, as the approaching figure comes into view, revealing a gigantic killer bear. Lara studies the situation and says that even if they tried, it would be impossible for a silver-ranked team to defeat it, and he feels a chill as he stares at the creature's monstrous size. The leader insists fleeing is the best option, but Rolf interrupts to say that is impossible, and only Kilfil has a chance to escape because she is of a feline race. The cat crosses her arms and declares she would never abandon her friends. The cleric insists they would lose if they fought. The scout gives a small squeal of fear, and Lyra remains composed while the bear growls and prepares to attack. Uncertain what to do, he asks, and Rolf says seriously that someone will have to act as his bait. The leader agrees. Everyone swallows nervously as the tension grows. Shuru treats the situation like a quiz and begins weighing the bait options. Option A, himself. Option B, the person who just joined the group today. Option C, the one who is an actual adventurer. Sighing, he knows that whatever choice is made, he will be the bait. Lyra touches his shoulder. Shuru resigns himself to his fate, already expecting an apology for being used as bait for the group's benefit. The leader's reply surprises him. Lyra orders him to flee with Nesca and Kilfo, while Lyra and Rolf lure the monster away. Shuru is left speechless. Lyra apologizes to Rolf, but the cleric just smiles and says not to worry, since it's been a long journey. The young man is stunned by their decision, and before he can respond, Nesca steps forward and offers to join the fight, but the warrior stops her, saying she's too slow and would only get in the way. He jokes that in the end he just wants to look cool to her. Lyra smiles at the sorceress and asks her to understand. Nesca looks down and calls him an idiot. The warrior gets ready and tells Rolf to keep a healing spell ready. If he isn't killed in one blow, the cleric only needs to wish him luck. Rolf nods, determined. Lyra says he will set a trap, and when it triggers, everyone must flee. In that instant, Kilfa's eyes widen, and she warns that something is approaching from behind. Lyra refuses to believe it. When he peers into the dark forest, he discovers the truth. They are surrounded by two killer bears. The beastly wars echo. Nesca steps back as the leader shouts for her and Kilfa to get ready to flee, and Rolf says he and the leader will cover them, but she trembles and refuses, saying there is no way to escape and they will die there. Monsters surge forward and corner the group. His heart races, then his grandmother's voice comes back to him. Tell him that even in despair, he must never give up. Rummaging quickly through his backpack, he draws Lyra's attention and prompts Shock to ask what he is doing, as the warrior shouts for him to run, but Shuru ignores the warning and faces the killer bear. Determined, he hurls something at the beast. The monster freezes, its muscles locking up. Explosives hover in the air, seconds from detonating. Fireworks explode, paralyzing the beast while the group watches, stunned. Shuru seizes the chance and charges the monster. He shouted that the bear would regret standing in front of him. Without hesitation, he pulls out a spray and sprays it directly at the animal's face. The bear hesitates before attacking, but Lyre shouts a warning as the monster prepares to strike him from behind. If it quickly turns around and sprays again, it will confuse the creature even more. Watching the can, he is amazed at how well the product works. A curious Lyre approaches and asks if that was some kind of magic. He smiles and explains it was just a special item, then shows the can and reveals it contains a powerful poison released when the package seal is broken. The merchants suggest using the opening to escape. Lyre cuts in and asks whether the poison reached the monster's eyes and nose, because if it did, they can't waste this golden opportunity. The group quickly understands the situation and prepares to attack. After a hard-fought battle, at last they emerge victorious and celebrate after defeating the monsters in the heart of the forest. Lyre warns they now have to cut the bear's meat and lazily trim it to size, while Sherba takes the chance to tease Lyre by asking whether he was in love with Nesca. The warrior and the sorcerers start to panic. His cheeks flushed as he asked, embarrassed, what Shiro meant by that. He then recalled when Lyra said he wanted to look cool in front of a scared girl, and the group leader shrugged, trying to end the subject shyly. Rolf leads the monster's dissection, assigning companions to strip the skin and cut the meat, while others collect the meat and other raw materials that fetch a good price on the market. Kilfa, curious, asks what they plan to do with the bear's lower parts. The cleric says the testicles can be used to make medicine and asks her to cut them, leaving Shuru traumatized by the scene. Lyra steps closer to Shuru. With a serious expression, he asks to say something important and tells him to abort the herb collection mission and return to the city. Pointing at the dead bear, he says the merchant would rather return to sell the materials before they rot, since there were far more than just high-level herbs. Sharing his surprise, Lyra says half the spoils are his. If not for what the young man brought, they would all be dead. Holding a spray can, he says it must be extremely expensive. Shiri reassures him that the most important thing is that everyone is alive. The merchant's words affect the liar, who smiles, moves, and praises Chiru's generosity. Kilfa pauses briefly, then suddenly launches herself at him, saying he is a great person. Shuri sidesteps the hug, and Kilfa tumbles headfirst into a bush as Nesca and the merchant watch. The sorceress agrees, saying Shuryu is a good person, and Rolf adds the world would be better if there were more merchants like him. Embarrassed, Shrew changes the subject and turns to Lyre, saying he understands the need to return to the city. He volunteers to carry the killer bear's supplies. Lyre laughs and doubts Shiro's physical strength. Before he can comment further, Shuru activates his spatial storage ability, tearing a rift in the fabric of reality, leaving the group stunned, and apologizes for not mentioning it earlier. Lyre recovers quickly and reassures him, saying it's no problem while the others lie to him. While Shura gets ready to leave, Lyre interrupts and says he can store the materials, so they should continue the mission. Before Shuru can protest, she's dragged into the adventure for 2 more days. Before they finally return to the city, Ina welcomes them, happy to be reunited with Shuru. Curious, Lyre asks whether the girl is Shira's daughter, then quickly says she is only his assistant at the shop. The warrior introduces himself politely, gives Aina the shop key with steady hands, and asks her to wait there. Then the group goes to the Silver Mood Guild to finish their mission, but when they open the door, they find something unexpected. They find Emil lying on the floor, crying as she begs a man for more time to gather the money. Shuru, expecting to finish the mission without problems, is intrigued by the scene. Shouting at the mill, the man says she has repeated the same thing for months, and this time he will not forgive her because he has waited too long. Shuru asks Lyre who that person is, and the warrior replies that he is Gerald, a materials merchant and a friend of the guild's former master. A young man approaches another man, introduces himself, and asks if he has time to talk so he can better understand the situation. Gerald takes off his hat and introduces himself. He said he had loaned 10 gold coins to the guild and demanded the building as collateral because of their debts. He presents the Silver Moon Guild contract, and Mel lowers her head. The man insists that if he does not get the money, he will take the property. He says the land around the building is part of the property, and selling it would let him recover his entire investment. Gerald orders Emil to bring the property deed immediately. Refusing stubbornly, she says she will not do it under any circumstances. He asks why she still insists on fulfilling her duty after the entire guild abandoned her, and says she should give up on the guild because there is no hope. Mel lifts her face with a serious expression and explains she stays there not just out of duty, as Shuru and Lyre watch with concern, revealing that as a half-breed despised by everyone, the Silver Moon Guild was the first place she felt part of something bigger. Remembering the good and bad she lived through there, she says she had more happy moments than sad ones, and with a warm expression declares she will not lose that no matter what. Shuru notices her reaction and remembers something important too. 5 years ago, his family gathered at his grandmother's house after the elderly woman had been missing without a trace for 2 years. Shira doesn't remember every detail, but he remembers his mother saying she was thinking of selling the house because keeping it no longer made sense. The moment he heard those words, the young man knelt at her feet. He begged her not to sell it because the place was full of his grandmother's memories, and he was deeply embarrassed to do that in front of all the relatives, who were completely shocked. Shuru steps forward, determined to intervene, and Lyre asks in surprise what he plans to do at that moment. Gerald tells Emil that personal feelings aside, a contract is still a contract, and she must fulfill the agreement. The girl replies without expression that she understands. Pulling the property deed from the drawer, she is ready to hand it over, but an interruption stops her before she can pass the papers. Shuru interrupts her and asks if she can buy something right then. He holds up the killer bear's hide, and the Jarl's eyes widen as the Jarl immediately recognizes the rare material. The hide's color shows it's from an even rarer species than he thought, and the merchant quickly asks if Shuri will sell it to him, but the young man apologizes and refuses, saying the hide is for the guild. Emil says she doesn't have enough money to buy the material, but assures she'll pay when she can and not worry about it. Moved by Shiru's kindness, Lyra is determined to follow his example, and he offers the same material. The warrior says milk can be paid for later. Stammering, the girls accept both of their favors with an excited and relieved expression. Gerald turns to Emil and insists she sell him the hide, offering 32 gold coins, but she refuses right away. Grimacing, she says the fair price is 36 coins, and the merchant swallows nervously as he weighs the value. After the deal, the guild's debts were paid off and Emil had 26 gold coins left. They sold the bear's balls for 2 coins, bringing the Silver Moon Guild's total to 28 coins. Satisfied, Gerald says his goodbyes and adds he is looking forward to the next negotiation warns that Emil still had one final chance. The girl bows and thanks him for his help. The group says she should thank Shirov, since they only did what was right as adventurers. Soon after, Lyre says they're still waiting for the mission to finish, and Emil freezes at the remark, then turns to Shiru and asks if he's there for the mission too. The young man simply replies by asking whether he should be there, and an impatient Emil tells him to leave, saying his business there is already over. The liar protests that the mission was to protect him, so he should stay. The girl folds her arms, says he's fine, and tries to end the conversation by urging them to drop it. The warrior presses her, asking if she spent the mission's money, and in a mild stammer she says she would never do that. Liar demands that she pay immediately, and the group insists on 30 silver coins for the service rendered. She is intrigued by the amount, and Liar explains they could not charge less because it was a serious job. The young man says that is not the problem. He says he paid 100 silver coins and asks if the extra 70 coins were taken from the guild. Liar and Mill stare at each other, and then Mill tries to slip away, but Liar notices and stops her, demanding an explanation. The sorceress draws a magic circle with her staff and threatens to burn the rabbit girl, while Kilfer crosses her arms, clearly irritated. Even Rolf gives off a frightening aura. Liar snaps his fingers and says he cannot forgive her for what she did. The group attacks the guildmaster, who runs desperately to escape their fury while Shuru sighs in relief. He thinks to himself that it was good he had not brought Aina and feels lucky to have found this side of a mill. The young man finally returns to the shop and finds Anna cleaning the stairs. She brightens and asks how his time as an adventurer went, and he says it was incredible and asks whether she wants to hear about his journey. Smiling, the girl agrees, and he begins to describe everything that happened. Finally, he says it was a terrible few days, and Anna grows excited, praising his courage for even defeating a killer bear. Embarrassed, Shiro says the Azure Flash group actually defeated the bear, and he only helped a little, but the girl insists they would have been defeated without him, and then someone knocks at the door calling his name loudly. He opens the door and finds himself face to face with Karen. Before he can react, she hugs him, burying his face between her ample assets. In tears, the mayor asks whether he is okay, saying she heard he had to face a bear during the mission, and the young man begins to suffocate as Inna steps in to tell Karen he cannot breathe properly. Panicked, the mayor thinks his throat has been crushed and quickly releases Shuru so he can catch his breath, then reassures her, telling her to stay calm since the adventurers protected him, which makes Karen look relieved, and more composed she asks how the mission went, and whether he managed to get anything good on his trip with the Azure Flash. Shura says yes and adds that if the stock arrives on time, everyone will want to see it because he hopes to surprise them with the new products. Calmly, the mayor repeats this and tells him he no longer needs to hide what he's really doing. Moving closer, she whispers in his ear about his storage ability, asking whether it is a special item rather than a skill. Shuru goes pale and tries to hide it, asking what she means, but Karen just smiles and says he can't lie, then explains that although the ability is rare, she's met others who used it, and that's how she realized. She continues, saying the first time she saw Shuru, she could smell it on him. Cornered, the young man admits she was right and asks whether this was feminine intuition. The mayor replies that it wasn't. She had only tricked him to confirm her suspicion, admits she knew no one else with that ability, and found it strange that he had a large stock of matches from the start. It takes a few seconds to process, then suddenly shouts, sounding shocked. Karen laughs, pats his shoulder, and says that in the commercial world people are not always honest, so he should be more careful with his information. And the young man admits he was careless and promises to be more attentive from now on to avoid the same mistake. Karen asks what new products she plans to sell, and Anna says she's curious too. Sharu unrolls an item in a mysterious voice. The mayor is left in disbelief that such a thing truly exists. Shortly after, Karen leaves, does some stretches, and celebrates 3 straight days of successful business. Liar steps into the shop, creating Shuru and asking if the shop is doing well after the mission, while Neska appears behind him and greets the merchant with a discreet, friendly gesture. The warrior praises the shop's organization and quick response, crediting Aina with organizing everything over the last few days. He watches them for a moment and sees the sorceress timidly tug Liar's sleeve. Shuru takes their behavior to mean they are dating and feels happy for the couple, though slightly envious. Lyra says he heard from Emmy that someone important from an adventurer's guild will visit the city, and the merchant confirms it. Lyra says he hopes it's a reputable guild, but his words leave Shuru intrigued and prompt him to ask the adventurer whether there are any questionable guilds. Lyra replies that even high-level guilds can have a bad reputation. The warrior names Fang of the Venom Dragon and Devil's Trident, but calls the Labyrinth Marauders the worst. Nestor agrees and Anna looks shocked. She recognizes the name as the guild Karen mentioned earlier. Everyone falls silent for a moment, and Shuru asks whether the mayor knew about the guild's dark reputation. Lyra says she might not have. Being an adventurer doesn't make it easy to get that kind of information in a town this small. Without phones or social networks, lack of information is common. He worries the guilt coming could cause problems and hopes it all ends well, thinking of Karen's safety. Anna notes the guild representative's delay and suggests he may have gotten lost on the way. Shura replies calmly that he may simply be dragging his feet. The other city's robes look proper, but may not be. Still, Karen has been waiting at the city entrance since the day before, and the child says it would be good if he arrived soon, with Shuru agreeing. A bell rings, marking the start of the afternoon and signaling to Anna that the day is over, so the girl says goodbye to him, cheerful as ever. The young man holds the key, and though he thinks it's still early, decides to close the shop. Before he can lock the door, he hears knocks on the wood, and when he opens it, he sees a long-haired girl in a uniform carrying 2 swords, her expression serious but her voice polite, as she apologizes for the delay and asks to see the item. Shurva tells her to feel free and quickly opens a matchbox. The girl watches with interest, and he suggests she try it herself. Her eyes light up with excitement as she says she heard rumors about the product and that it seems amazing. Then she points to another package and asks what it is, and Shiro explains it is a survival blanket, an item that protects against the cold and can replace regular blankets. Wrapping the girl in the blanket, the young man remembers how impressed the adventurers and the mayor were when they first saw it. Smiling in awe, the girl says that even though it is thin, the blanket is warm and cozy, then points to another item curious about its use, and Sheriff explains it is a collapsible water bottle and takes the opportunity to show several other products while the girl listens attentively. Finally, she thanks him for the explanation, says she must leave because she's late for an appointment, says goodbye and hurries off, leaving Shuru intrigued. A few days later, Ine rushes into the shop calling for Shuru. The young man freezes at her exasperated look and asks what happened. Karen walks through the city when an unfamiliar man approaches and asks if she is the mayor, his voice firm and his stance intimidating. An inspector from the capital's Adventurers Guild steps forward, and Karen feels a chill as she realizes something is wrong. Shuru and Ine run to the meeting point, and the young man thinks he will finally meet this person, but did not expect to be summoned so soon. Karen had planned to show him the city and the market before taking him to Shuru's shop, but when they arrive, the young man is surprised by what he finds. Anna says the mayor asked for him to be called urgently. Entering the Silver Moon Guild, he finds Karen, Mill, and the Azure Flash adventurers. They all wear serious expressions. A mysterious figure has his back turned to him, and Shuru thinks it might be the inspector. Karen steps closer and whispers that he's hard to deal with, asking him to stay calm even if the man says something rude, but Shiro notices the mayor is trembling. The young man smiles to reassure her, saying he has handled ignorant people before and will not give in no matter what, and Karen watches him with relief before turning to introduce Shiro to Gabbas, the guild inspector from the capital. She forces a firm tone, but tension shows in her words. The mayor calls Shiro the pride of the city. He introduces himself, along with Anna. Gabbas sighs, saying he expected a professional merchant. Looking at Aina and Moxer, he says the young man hired an inexperienced brat. Aina recoils, frightened, while Shiro forces a smile to hide his anger. Gabba looks around and mutters that the Silver Moon Guild is filthy and that demi-humans can't even do basic cleaning. Mel becomes furious and says she cleans every day in her free time. The inspector laughs derisively and asks whether she's sure it's clean. Karen watches with restrained hatred. Gavis keeps insisting that demi-humans who can't work shouldn't be alive, and Kulfa and Emil tremble with rage, but the mayor steps in, changes the subject and asks if he wants to see Shiro's products. Studying the matches, the man looks impressed for the first time. At least that item is good quality, he says, and Karen smiles hopefully. Soon Gabbas drops the matchstick, sits without concern, and announces he will open a Labyrinth Marauders branch in the city. Karen can hardly believe it as Emil scolds him for throwing a matchstick inside the guild, but he ignores her protest. The inspector then lays down his terms, saying his guild will be the only one in the city and that all the others must be shut down immediately. Staring at the middle, he asks if she has anything to say about that weak, small guild, and the rabbit girl protests that its name is Silver Moon, but Gabba dismisses her and says it does not matter and they should just shut the guild down. Furious, Mill charges at him, but a Karen holds her back again. The inspector keeps talking and demands full tax exemption, arguing the small town would bring no profit and he needs the resources to build the new guild. At last, he demands exclusive rights to sell the matches, declaring that all of Shiro's store stock now belongs to him. The man tosses boxes onto the table with a smug smile. Shiro stares at him, puzzled by his intentions, while Gabbas leans in, doubts he is really a merchant, and calls him an idiot and a fool. The inspector moves closer and says he wants to buy all the matches in the store. Karen steps in, but he turns to her with an arrogant look and asks what she wants. The mayor refuses to accept the exclusive sales, even if they would help the city's growth, and Gabbas laughs at her naivety. The man says Ninorich has limited trade because it's far from major cities, but his guild could distribute its products across the kingdom. That greedy smile makes it clear he only cares about profits. Shiro crosses his arms and says the offer is interesting, but he must decline, explaining there is a stock limit and he refuses to sell everything to a single guild. Sighing, Karen says they can't accept the branch in the city. Anger twists Gubba's face and he snatches a glass bottle. He throws it at Karen, missing her by mere inches, then screamed furiously, demanding to know who they thought he was and saying the city's guild was already doomed to fail, while Lyre watched the scene, feeling his blood boil. Shiro takes a deep breath and steps in, asking them to wait, and points out that the forest near the city holds monsters and rare herbs that make the area valuable, adding that many adventurers use the city as their base. Gabba laughs at his words, steps forward, grabs Shiro by the tie, and calls him a fool. Claiming the city's adventurers were weak and had no potential, he added that they could make money in the capital or other big cities, so they went to places with little competition. Neska's anger flares, but Lyre motions for calm as her aura intensifies, and everyone nearby feels the weight of her presence. Gavis continues, calling the value ridiculous and infuriating the mayor and Emil, then presses Shiro, asking what he planned to do since opening a branch in Minorich would benefit the city. Shiro holds the place's future, and when the young man asks for time to think, Gabbas refuses, saying there is no time to spare. Smirking, the inspector points at Anna and says that if Shiro accepted the deal, he could finally hire someone qualified instead of the little girl. After a short silence, the young man coldly asks him to repeat it, and Gabbas, sure he has finally convinced him, repeats that he can replace the useless brat and the filthy demihumans with real workers. Shiro snaps as his pent-up anger erupts into a decisive punch, his fist hitting Gabbas squarely in the face and sending him reeling backward while he shouts in fury and charges the man without hesitation as everyone watches in shock. While arguing, Shira has a strong sense of déjà vu. It mirrored the day he quit the company. A boss kept provoking the new employee who admired him until Shiro lost his temper. Gubbas speaks like the young man's former boss who lost control. With a shout, he landed a powerful punch on the inspector, sending him flying. Azure Flash members watch in surprise as Emil appears enchanted. Karen approaches and Shiro asks whether Gabbas did something strange to her. Taken aback, the mayor hesitates. Embarrassed then admits that he touched her inappropriately. Shiro's expression darkens. Angry, he grabs Jevis by the hair. Karen pleads with him to stop, saying it's no longer necessary. The cleric Rolf steps in and calls out to the young man. Shiro returns, but Rolf only offers help. The young man accepts and keeps dragging the inspector. Remembering what he did when he resigned, he lifts Gabbas with Rolf's help and slams him upside down onto the guild's counter. The impact causes the floor to shake. The sheriff stands firm and says he hates violence, but he won't let anyone belittle his employee or take advantage of the mayor, and Karen and Ine are moved, their eyes filling with tears. The young man kicks Gabbas again and says he is not good enough to stay silent about this. Anna rushes over and wraps her arms around him, tears in her eyes. Gabbai's angered Kitsap, who shouted that he would take revenge on the city. Boasting that he's the manager of the Labyrinth Marauders, he threatens everyone, but Karen glares at him coldly and asks whether he intends to declare war on her city. The mayor adds that if it comes to that, she will notify the ruler of the Marcus Basher territory. The inspector goes pale, stammers, and tries to backtrack. The inspector argues that if they give him priority in match sales, he will ignore everything that happened, and he tugs his ear hard to prove it, and tells him his ears are plugged because he cannot hear properly. The young man refuses to sell and warns him that if he tries anything, he will destroy his guild. Karen and the adventurers watch, determined. Confident shouts. Someone asks if he understood, and Gabbas Neal is begging for a price. The young man says he will be more careful about who he does business with in the future. Gabbas shifts the topic and tries to negotiate the guild's branch, but Karen shrugs and refuses again. Liar laughs and mocks Gabbas, saying his greed left him with nothing. The inspector tells Liar to be quiet, and a furious Gabbas insults Liar, calling him a weak adventurer. The warrior grabs him by the collar and warns him to keep quiet. Shiro asks him not to use violence, and Lai says the young man hit him too. McGibbs kicked us and says he's worthless. The warrior points toward the capital, and Gabbas crawls away in anger. Liar, Emil, and Rolf say they are not satisfied with that alone. The mayor calms the crowd, tells them to forget it, and looks to Shiro for support. Knocking at the door catches Liar's attention. He becomes irritated, thinking Gabba has returned. When he opens the door, he sees the girl who visited Shiro's shop. She asks to come in and says she knew the mayor was here, which is why she showed up so suddenly. Of course, we recognize her. Karen introduces herself and asks who she is. The girl says she is Namaraj, a messenger from the Fairies' Blessing Guild. Liar's eyes widen when he hears the name, and he says it is the largest guild in the country. Karen asks what brought them in. Smiling, she says she wants to open a guild branch in Nineric. Determined, she says she came to ask a favor. Nay stays calm while Karen watches her with suspicion, asking whether she truly intended to open a guild branch in the city. Hidden behind Shiro, Emil looks at Karen and warns it could be a trap, framing it as advice from a concerned friend. Nay blinks briefly. She suddenly turns around, grabs Emil's hands and asks whether she works at the guild, her eyes sparkling with excitement. The rabbit girl is startled, but before she can respond, Nay says she needs to speak with her as well and adds that if the Silver Moon Guild joins her, Emil's salary will increase significantly. Nye lifts her hand above her head and promises a huge raise. Mel watches the motion, wide-eyed as her heart races. The rabbit girl asks whether her salary will really go up. Nye immediately confirms she will earn 5 times as much, and her confident smile makes it clear she is serious. The mill jumps back, pulling away instinctively, but comes forward again soon after. Kneeling before Nye, she vows that Silver Moon Guild will become a branch of Fairies' Blessing, her voice trembling. Grabbing Naya's legs, she begs the mayor to accept her choice. Karen watches, stunned and unable to believe what she hears. After a moment's thought, the mayor asks Shura for her opinion. Crossing his arms, the young man says they should at least hear Nay's proposal before deciding, and Karen agrees, inviting them to her office to discuss it where they all gather. While sipping a cup of tea, the mayor asked Knight to explain why she had made that decision. Nye reveals that a few days earlier, a group of adventurers discovered a dungeon and found an unfamiliar map inside that shows a continent never recorded before, and he believes the map may belong to an ancient civilization. A civilization adept at magic could be the discovery of the century. Her gaze shifts to Shuru and Karen, and her expression turns serious. Now comes the most important part. The map shows several ancient sites in the forest east of the city, perhaps even forgotten kingdoms. Nay unrolls the map across the table and places her hands on it. Shocked, Karen asks if that's true, her voice full of surprise. He explains firmly that the Labyrinth Marauders had already shown interest in the city because they intended to monopolize the ruins. Picking up a small figurine from the table, she knocks it over to show their failure because they tried to force their presence but were rejected by the inspector's unreasonable demands. Mai smiles and says that, unlike the Labyrinth Marauders, her guild wanted to team up with the city to explore the ruins fairly. After careful study, they chose this city as the best base for this great mission because, beyond its strategic position, it had one important advantage. Sherwood asks what makes the city special, and the main reason is the Silver Moon Guild, the only guild in the region. If they could take over the local guild, they could turn it into a branch of Fairies' Blessing. Without having to build a new building, they could start the exploration right away. Also, Shiro's shop caught Nay's attention. His products were outstanding and would make a big difference to the new operation. Smiling, she bows and asks Shiru to consider opening a branch of his store inside the guild. Her determined gaze makes Karen gulp nervously. Suspicious, the mayor asks what Nai wants in return for establishing the guild branch in the city, her voice firm. Confused and embarrassed, the girl listens as Shiro explains the situation caused by Gabbas. Nezai grows increasingly indignant at all the demands the man makes, even though he was allowed to open the guild branch. Shiro says the inspector insulted him, and Karen describes the harassment she endured. Gabbas was despicable. Still stunned, Nay calls it unforgivable, but reassures Karen that with Mill's consent, they would not need to build a new headquarters. They would need a safe space for people who owe money to adventurers. She assures that salaries would be paid correctly and taxes would be charged according to the city's rules. Karen studies Nay more closely and confirms her name. She extends her hand with a small smile and says it will be a pleasure to work with her. Then they shake hands as her eyes sparkle with enthusiasm, and she thanks her for the trust and permission. Silver Moon Guild, once on the brink of bankruptcy, became part of the country's largest guild. A few days later, Shiro's shop is still busy. One day, while serving a customer, someone calls Anna to fetch some large matches, but the girl does not respond. She stays still and looks worried. The caller calls again. Getting no reply, he moves closer and speaks into her ear. The little brule startles, turns around, apologizes, and asks whether he needs the broom. Because of his size, Shiro keeps repeating that he needed the large matches. Anna rushes to get them, but is soon distracted again. The young man begins counting coins and notices her mind is elsewhere. Calling her again, he notices her hesitation and asks if something happened. Nervously, Aina lowers her head and her small hands tremble. She hesitates, then drops to her knees with tears in her eyes. Her voice broke as she said she needed money, and at that moment, a pile of coins fell to the ground. He takes her hands in his, relieved, and asks how much she needed. Hesitating, Anna begins to apologize, saying she did not mean to cause any problems. Shiri looks at her kindly and gently pats her head, reassuring her. With a smile, he tells her everything is fine, and she doesn't need to worry because asking for help was very brave, and her courage is admirable. The young man asks whether something happened to her mother, and Anna looks visibly shaken. Before she could respond, Lyra burst in, agitated, calling Shiru to eat. Seeing the girl's expression, he apologizes for interrupting. Shortly after, Karen comes in and calls the young man to discuss the city's development, but when she sees the situation, she hesitates and apologizes. Lyra asks if they should come back later, then goes to Ina to ask for her opinion. The little brule wipes away her tears and says everything is fine and everyone can stay there. Smiling, the young man looks at the others and decides to hold a council to listen to her and help her. Lyra pats his chest and says to leave it to them because Rolf is good with such matters. As mayor, Karen steps forward and tells Aina she can come to her with any problems. Tears well up in the little birdle's eyes. Shiru says he wanted to help too. The girl finally speaks through sobs, saying her mother was ill. At that moment, the girl's mother has a coughing fit at home. The flowers Aina had picked begin to wilt slowly. Anna remembers being 4, living in a small house and very happy with her parents, and she clearly recalls family meals where she always sat next to her favorite teddy bear. Everything changed one day when the sea they lived in was suddenly engulfed by war. Their home, once welcoming, burned completely, and even her favorite toy turned to ashes while her mother held her tightly in a protective embrace. Out of the rubble and destruction, her father stepped forward carrying the small teddy bear, now worn and dirty, his face somber and full of sorrow. Losing everything was devastating, but for Aina the worst pain was watching soldiers take her father. He hugged Aina and her mother tightly. He promised he'd return soon, then left them completely alone. The war lasted only 6 months, yet years went by and Anna's father never came back. At 6, her mother told her they had to move to another city, but the stubborn girl refused, fearing that if they moved, her father would not be able to find them when he returned. Faced with her daughter's reaction, the mother had nothing more to say, and simply hugged her, crying, and stood there speechless, unsure what to do. Shortly after, it left the city behind, and they crossed several borders, walking day and night until they reached Nanorik. A curious little girl asked her mother why they had come to this city. Her mother replied that there would be no more war then, and she didn't want to lose any more people who mattered. Life in the border city was harsh, and her mother worked long days in the fields, giving up her own meals so her daughter could eat, and over time her body wasted away. When Anna fell ill, her mother kept apologizing, and the little girl started blaming herself for making her mother work so hard. At night, Anna clung to her teddy bear and cried alone on the floor of her small room until, after she cried herself out, she had an idea. Determined to grow up quickly, she put away her toy and looked at herself in the mirror. She left determined to sell flowers, and with the little she had gathered, she earned enough to get a permit to sell in the city, so every morning Ada went to the market and returned only at night with her basket of flowers. One day she met Shiro, and the moment she saw him, her attention locked on him. Not only did he buy her flowers, he also found her a job. Because of that, Anna could comfort her mother more, which made her very happy. The little girl thanked the gods she knew and offered a prayer of gratitude. Receiving her first salary of 10 silver coins, Aina knew exactly what to spend it on. Rushing through the market, she found an adventurer who had once told her he had a potion that could cure any disease. Without hesitation, the girl spent her entire salary on the potion and gave it to her mother, falsely claiming she had received it from Shiro. The woman who drank the medicine and Anna were full of hope, but that hope soon turned into frustration. Despite drinking the whole bottle, her mother did not improve at all. Desperation overwhelmed Anna, and her vision blurred. Nothing mattered except finding a way to save her mother from the disease. It became clear she needed money, because with enough she could. Taking her mother to a big city could get her proper treatment. Determined, Aina went to Shiro and prayed to God that even if he hated her, he would still agree to save her mother's life. Summoning all her courage, as she asked Shiro for money, she braced for his contempt. To her surprise, the young man didn't mistreat her. He simply patted her head gently, and in that moment, Aina felt embraced like she hadn't in a long time. Having listened carefully to everything said, he took a deep breath and gave an understanding look that showed he grasped the situation. Anna kept her head down, her small shoulders trembling, and her sad expression revealing how heavy she felt. A momentary silence settled over the room, then something broke the quiet. Silence broke when Lyre struck the wall beside him with a hard blow, chipping a few bricks, his eyes blazing with pure indignation, and his voice ringing with fury as he demanded to know which miserable wretch had sold that potion to Ina. Clenching his fists and punching the air in anger, he vowed that if he found the one responsible, he would make them pay for deceiving an innocent little girl and beat them 100 times without mercy. Before he could continue, Neska stepped forward and hit the liar on the head with her staff, scolding him and telling him not to destroy other people's things. Meanwhile, Rolf walked to Anna, crouched to her level, and spoke in a calm, serious voice. He admitted that, although it was hard to accept, the potion she had given her mother did not cure diseases, and the little girl looked up, confused, and asked him to explain. Calmly, the cleric explained that heal potions only work on external wounds, and cure potions neutralize poisons. No potion could cure diseases. Aina blinked a few times as she tried to process the news. With an innocent look, she insisted the soldier adventurer had guaranteed the potion would cure her mother. Rolf sighed, lowered his head, and said he was very sorry, explaining that the adventurer had lied to her and sold something that did not have the promised effect. Then he slowly repeated the cleric's words and said she understood. The moment the cruel truth hit her, tears filled her eyes and slid down her face, sure to wash her, and he felt a tightness in his chest at her suffering, while Lyre grew enraged again, lashing out at everything around him. He broke the window without measuring his strength, looked furious, and shouted that he would hunt that bastard down, so Neska and Kulfad decided to go with him and asked Rolf to handle the rest of the punishment. One member was determined to catch the criminal, while the rest of the group went with Anna to her house to see how her mother was doing. Shiro walks behind the little girl with a serious expression, still thinking about what she had told him about the disease. Karen also looks thoughtful when the pharmacist calls it the disease of a ruined life, prompting her to think about how serious it is. While they walk, Shiro pulls Rolf aside and quietly asks him about the disease. Rothan explains that the symptoms were a slow weakening of the body, as if the limbs were rotting, and the person would lose all strength, and some scholars had tried to find how it spread, but its origin remained unknown, and infected people could die. And Shiro feels a chill run down his spine as he hears this, and realizes the situation is more serious than he imagined. After walking for a while, Anna points to a small house, and seeing it, can't help thinking how remarkable it was that the little girl left this house on the outskirts every day to sell flowers and earn money for her mother. She takes a deep breath, gathering her courage. She pushes the door open with a big smile to announce her arrival, speaks warmly and energetically as she invites Shiro inside, and likely introduces him to her mother. Lying on the bed, the woman looks at the young man with a gentle gaze. Despite her weakness, Stella forced herself to sit up and introduce herself. In a soft voice, she thanks Shiro for caring for her daughter. He quickly replies that he should be the one thanking her for everything. Stella, though weak, tries to stand and apologizes for not being properly dressed. Anna and Shiro became alarmed and told her not to exert herself because her health was more important. The woman still tried to protest that it would be impolite to receive guests while lying down. Anna insisted she needed to rest right then. Stella turned to Karen, who quickly said this woman was the town's mayor. Concern crosses Stella's face, and with some apprehension she asks why the mayor was there. Rolf calmly says that when they learned of Amos' troubles, they went in person to check. Stella sighs and apologizes for making them worry and come to her home. Shaking her head, Karen says she should apologize because as mayor she felt helpless, not being able to help everyone who needed it. Her face shows frustration and regret, and Stella notices and appreciates it even though she is not from that town. Turning to her daughter, she asks when she became friends with the mayor and why she never mentioned it before. Aina, eyes sparkling, replies that she had become friends not only with Karen but also with Shuru and Rolf. Besides them, Lyre, Kulfa, and Neska were incredible adventurers, and Stella looks at her daughter with a warm, tender gaze, asking whether she is happy to have made so many friends. Smiling broadly, the little girl replies right away that she is very happy. Seeing her daughter's happiness, Stella feels warmth in her heart. Aina then asks her mother if she has eaten and suggests making soup for their guests. If anyone's going to cook, Stella says she'll do it herself, but Emma insists there's no need because she likes to cook and wants to take care of everything. The girl says she'll go to the river to fetch water, and Rolf offers to go with her. Stella watches the scene briefly, then asks Karen to step outside for a bit. Needing a private conversation with Shuru, she waits until they are alone. Shuru looks at her expectantly, and after a brief hesitation Stella, with a serious, determined expression, finally reveals that she actually wanted to ask Anna for a favor. She looked into the young man's eyes and asked. She asked him to look after her daughter if anything happened to her. Shuru is stunned by the unexpected question, and for a moment can't find the words to reply, and Stella sees his reaction and immediately apologizes for making such a sudden, possibly selfish request. But she knows time is running out, and she can't stop worrying about Anna's future, her eyes growing sad as she asks whether the little girl has already told him about the disease. The young man nods in confirmation, and the mother quietly asks whether her daughter cried while talking about it. Shura says she did, but Aina had already been crying before she began, and Stella closes her eyes, takes a deep breath, and looks visibly shaken because she had imagined this for a long time. She understood how hard her daughter had been trying, even after she lost the ability to work and had to rely on her to survive. Being a mother who could do nothing for her own daughter was unbearably painful. Seeing Anna force a smile to hide her worry hurt her most, and in the last few days, Stella had noticed a change in the little girl's behavior. Watching Anna enjoy herself while they talked caught her attention, so one day unable to contain her curiosity, she asked her daughter why she was so happy. Her reply came with enthusiasm and a sparkle in her eye, saying she now had a very kind big brother and was very happy. At that moment Stella felt something deep, and looking at Shuru she saw he resembled Anna's father. When she saw him walk through the door earlier, a strange feeling came over her that the person who left finally returned. Sherba felt a tightness in his chest and apologized, saying he was sorry to be there instead of Na's real father and that he regretted it, but Stella smiled faintly and said he did not have to apologize because that was not the point. She meant she felt happy. His presence helped her remember her husband's face, which she had begun to forget, and that memory comforted her. Tears filled her eyes and her voice trembled as she said she was sure she would find her husband faster when her time came. Shiru's eyes widened and he asked what she meant, and Stella sighed with a calm expression, saying that because of her condition her body would not last much longer, and she probably had little time left. Struggling to get up, she gave the young man a determined look and repeated her plea that he take care of Aina when she was no longer around, because though Aina seemed strong and brave, deep down she was still a crying little girl who would need someone by her side to help her move forward. Right before finishing her sentence, Stella lost her balance and her body went weak. Reacting quickly, she stepped forward and caught her before she hit the ground. They stood for a moment, staring at each other, embarrassed by the sudden closeness. Concerned, he asked if she was okay. Stella, still dazed, gave a small nod and he helped her back onto the bed. At that moment, something caught his attention. He asked if he could touch her foot for a moment, and she immediately blushed. Warmth spread across her face and her heart raced. Despite her embarrassment, she closed her eyes and hesitantly agreed, not understanding the reason for such a request. Shiru watched closely and after a few seconds. That confirmed it was as he thought. Stella opened her eyes and looking confused asked what he meant. Then awkward and nervous, she asked whether he liked her legs. Sherry choked, flushed, and quickly denied it, saying it was nothing like that. He was beginning to understand the cause of the disease, the life it had ruined, and he might know how to treat it. Stella's eyes widened in surprise. She could not believe what she had just heard. Before that, she had never thought a treatment was possible. Before she could pull herself together, tears rolled down her face as she sobbed quietly, still not wanting to die or leave her daughter alone while the child was so small and innocent. Shura held her hands firmly and told her she wouldn't die and could keep living with Ine once he figured out what to do. The bedroom door opened and Karen stepped in, asking whether the conversation was over, while Anna and Rolf entered right behind her. Their eyes widened in shock when they saw Shiro holding Stella's hands with a determined expression. Karen and Rolf are stunned, staring at the young man and unsure what to think, while Shiro freezes as panic takes over and all he can think is how he'd explain the situation. It was very hard to explain what happened as Karim gave off a terrifying aura and Rolf kept his weapons ready for anything. Confused, Aina asked her mother what was going on, and Stella, still wiping away her tears, explained the situation. Relief washed over Shura when he realized Stella had cleared everything up, as he pictured what would have happened if she had not spoken, so he cleared his throat to gather his thoughts and explained that the disease that ruins lives was called Barabari in his homeland, which surprised everyone, and he continued. Doctors said the illness was caused by a lack of essential vitamins in the body, and in advanced stages, the deficiency led to numbness in the limbs that prevented movement. But the treatment was surprisingly simple, since replenishing the missing vitamins was enough. Anna lit up at the news and asked whether any medicine could cure her mother. Shiru smiled and said yes. He remembered his grandmother's words, to always help those in difficulty. Determined, he activated his alchemy to convert his money into yen and set off to buy the medicine. Later, he returned with a bottle of pills and explained to Stella. Although it did not look promising, the medicine could cure her. The mayor and the cleric examined the bottle with curiosity, since neither had seen anything like it. Stella hesitated and asked if the medicine was very expensive. The woman smiled and said not to worry because the cost had already been paid with a smile, and she would not protest. The young man stood his ground, saying that when he arrived in this town Aina had helped him countless times, and that now it was his turn to repair. He handed her the pill with a glass of water, and Stella accepted it with tears in her eyes, swallowing the medicine with full hope. A month later, the bell rang to mark the start of another day. Aina arrived home with Shiru, and when she opened the door, her mother greeted her. When the little girl saw her standing, her eyes widened, and she asked if her mother was feeling better. Stella smiled warmly and said she was surprised too because she felt incredibly well. Aina ran to her and asked if they could sleep together like they used to, and Stella hesitated before saying yes. From that moment on, they slept together every night. A mother and her daughter hold each other tightly, tears of joy running down their faces. Tears streamed down Anna's face as her mother held her, apologized for causing so much worry, and vowed they would never be separated again. Shuru watched quietly, feeling real happiness to see them finally living together in peace, and thinking of his grandmother he imagined she would be proud to see that he had saved someone. Later that night, the young man stood on his balcony. They held a drink, reflecting on everything that had happened. The day had truly been incredible. The vitamins fully cured Stella, and Anna could now talk with her mother. She could pick flowers and play without worries, and you'd notice she seemed healthier and her joy was contagious. The Silver Moon Guild was officially recognized as a branch of the Fairies' Blessing. With that, the Azure Flash Group began serving the main guild by exploring the forest. Shiru thought about his finances. He'd made about 50 million yen in the past 2 months, and if he kept that pace for another year, he could save enough to retire. The idea of living alone at home without having to work excited him. His moment of quiet was broken when Karen appeared behind him, startling him so much he nearly dropped his drink, and she smiled and wished him good night. He's still trying to recover from the shock and says he nearly had a heart attack from the scare. The mayor laughed, apologized, and asked what he had been drinking. Shurev said he was homesick, then asked if she wanted to have a drink with him. Karen agreed. The two of you chatted animatedly while enjoying the drink. At one point, the mayor asked if she should pat the young man's head, and before he could respond, Karen pulled his head toward her and rested Shuru on her lap. He tried to protest, but she said he had admitted the Teiku loosens up when praised. Embarrassed, he confirmed. The mayor ordered him to stay quiet while she stroked the young man. He then asked whether she had drunk too much. Karen said in a kind tone that she was sincerely grateful he had come to the city. She told him it wasn't a reward, and if there was anything she could do for him, he should ask without hesitation. Sheriff stood up and said it was unnecessary because he had only done what was within his reach. Karen watched him briefly and said she understood because he did not seem greedy. Embarrassed, the young man quickly denied asking her not to think of him as a man of good character, saying he liked money and was very greedy. He also remembered his grandmother, teaching him to always help people in need. Karen smiled and said his grandmother seemed to have been an incredible woman, then asked what her name was. Sherwood paused, then said his grandmother's name was Arisago Amyo. Karen repeated the name aloud, and her eyes widened as if she had just realized something important. Without warning, she grabbed the young man by the shoulders and shook him frantically, asking whether he was the grandson of Arisu, the immortal witch, and Shiru, stunned by her reaction, asked whether the mayor knew anything about his grandmother. Karen revealed she knew of the legendary immortal witch and that everyone on the continent knew of her too, though few had seen her in person, and she was not one of them, making the situation even more confusing. Karen told him she had met Eris the year before at the Harvest Festival, when the witch suddenly appeared in the middle of town, drinking and dancing. The young man believed that was impossible because his grandmother had vanished 7 years earlier. Before he could argue, Karen cut him off and said she clearly remembered that on that occasion the witch had gathered star fragments and created a magical sword called Mel Gibson. Shiru took a moment to absorb all the information. The sword's name brought back a memory from his childhood. He recalled seeing a poster of a famous actor in his grandmother's house. When he asked who it was, she said it was her favorite actor and even kissed the photo. Karen, still surprised, said she could hardly believe Shura's grandmother was that witch, but it made sense since the young man always showed up with medicines and unfamiliar items. She asked if he had found his grandmother yet. Sherwood said he hadn't seen her in 7 years, excused himself, stepped onto the balcony and took a deep breath, and shouted loudly that his grandmother was still alive. Back in the present, Shura returns to his grandmother's house and sits on the floor, staring at the altar with her photo, unable to believe she was still alive. Thoughts whirl as he looks at the photo of the elderly woman who always loved posing with the peace sign, never caring what others thought. He takes a deep breath, trying to sort his feelings. Determini looks at the photo once more, certain he would finally find her again at the Harvest Festival. He stands and crosses the portal, returning to the other world. Talking with Karen the day before, he learned his grandmother was not just an eccentric woman, but a famous, legendary witch. Reflecting on the elderly woman's disappearance, the mayor told Shiru she understood his eagerness to find her, but that it would be better if he stayed in Minerik a bit longer, since last year his grandmother turned up right at the Harvest Festival. Shiru was struck by the thought that if it had happened once, it could happen again, and since his grandmother liked festivals, she was likely to attend this year's event. Karen confirmed his suspicions and said it would be a special festival because the city was celebrating its 120th anniversary. As mayor, she was already planning a grand celebration and invited him to help. After a few weeks, Shiru realized only 2 months remained until the event. Liking festivals, he accepted Karen's request without hesitation. Now he faced a dilemma, unsure what to offer. Food seemed unoriginal because other stalls and contests would cover it, and traditional festival games were out since many vendors would already have them. Reflecting for a while, he realized how hard it was to think of anything but food and rubbed his head in frustration as he tried to force his memory to recall a childhood moment that might help. An idea struck him, and without wasting time, he added several cameras and took them to the store. Seeing the equipment and the puzzled frown, Shura smiled and said that was a good question. Excited, he replied that they were cameras and that he planned to sell them as a new product, but the little girl still could not understand. Seeing the doubt on her face, he decided to demonstrate it in practice, asked Ayanan to look at him, and quickly took a photo. When the image was shown to the little girl, Aina's eyes widened in shock. She asked how it had ended up inside the paper and whether it had become tiny and trapped there. Shiru laughed, asked if she was surprised, explained the item could instantly turn people and landscapes into paintings, and said it was a great opportunity to test it. He asked Aina to smile as he took several pictures of her. His little brother loved the photos and wanted to learn to use the camera. After some clumsy effort, she finally managed to take a photo of Shiru. She eagerly asked if it had worked, and he said the photo came out really well. Beaming, Aina grew more excited and wanted to take more photos of him. The young man joined the fun and struck a few poses. After a few photos, he said that was enough for him. Aina pointed at another camera and asked what it was. Shurv explained it was a Polaroid, and Aina, impressed by how many different models there were, was nudged by a young man to get her attention. As she turned, he snapped a photo and joked that he'd caught her by surprise. Looking at the photo, the little girl complained that she looked strange, then had an idea and called to Shuru. As he turned, she snapped another Polaroid and laughed. She said it was her turn to surprise him. He raised an eyebrow and asked if it was revenge. When you look at the photo, he is making the peace sign. In that picture, he looked a lot like his grandmother. Just then Stella entered the store and thanked Shiru for looking after her daughter that day. Smiling, he asked how she was settling into the new house and if the move had left her tired. Stella said that thanks to his help she did not feel tired. Shiru had rented corporate housing so mother and daughter could live near the store. Anna took the chance to gossip, saying her mom was terrible at organizing. Stella felt embarrassed and asked. They asked their daughter not to say those things, but Shiru just laughed and said they could count on him if they needed help. Feeling awkward, Anas thanked him. Then he joked that he was terrible at organizing things, leaving Shuri speechless, and Shuri scratched his head and apologized while the little girl smiled at him. Waving a second time, she said goodbye. Shuri returned the wave, watching the two walk away with a calm, happy expression. The Silver Moon Guild was now a member of the powerful Fairy Blessing Guild. Shiro remembered the first time he had been there, when the only sound was the cries behind her desk, but now as he entered the building, he found a completely different scene. Some adventurers were chatting animatedly, exchanging information about the forest. The young man could hardly believe that this guild, which had nearly shut down 2 months earlier, was now one of the kingdom's busiest. Seeing him, Emil caught his attention and moved in quickly. She asked if he had come just to see her. The bunny then patted Shiru and with a mischievous smile wondered whether he had bought a special, expensive gift for her. Anointed Shiro asked her to stop, but Emil continued to tease. She said she would accept marrying him and living a life of luxury if he wanted, and she already pictured herself in a grand castle, taking carriage rides or even flying on a dragon while throwing gold coins to the people. Sheriff, however, firmly rejected the idea. Unfazed, Emil insisted he could do whatever he wanted with her, and that, despite appearances, she was very affectionate. At the same time, she began unbuttoning her shirt, which made Shiru panic and beg her to stop. Trying to escape, he said she should be at work. But Emil replied with a sly smile that she was about to take a break. Before Shiru could react, the rabbit girl pushed him against the wall and asked whether he wanted to drink with her in a dark, empty room. He tried to get away, thanked her, and refused. Grabbing her hand, he stepped back and repeated his grandmother's rule that you should never be alone in a dark room with a woman who can't handle alcohol, since it had been her last request. He had just learned his grandmother was still alive, and the adventurers around him laughed, saying he was trying again. Feigning ignorance, the rabbit girl smiled and said Shiryu held her hands so passionately that if she had not pushed him away, he would have taken her to a dark room. Moving even closer, she said that no matter how much Shiryu put her down, she knew he wanted her, and the young man broke out in a cold sweat as Emil tried to kiss him. So desperate, Shiryu called for help, saying he was being attacked by an octopus, and then a shadow appeared behind Emil. Kilfa the scout landed a precise kick that sent the rabbit girl flying into a wooden barrel. Shiryu celebrated, saying the terrible octopus trap had been defeated, and when Kilful asked if he was okay, the young man, tears of relief in his eyes, confirmed that he was. At the guild's bar, the adventurers raised their beer mugs in a cheerful toast. Shiro thanked Kilfa for saving him from Emil's grasp. Kilfa explained that rabbit people got even more excited during the full moon. Emil protested that it wasn't true, but Neska the sorceress felt sorry for Shiro and said it didn't seem like a healthy relationship. Rolf joked that Ms. Emil had nearly taken a bite of Shiru's forbidden fruit, and the proud rabbit girl confirmed it by taking a bite of a chicken leg. The group turned to her in surprise, asking how she could still be there. Emil said she didn't like being left out. Loud shouts then echoed through the hall. Two adventurers on edge. The others quickly grew excited and began betting on who would win, so Shiro stood up and told them to stop the fight. Liar laughed and said fights between adventurers were normal, almost like a greeting, and that tension in town had been rising lately. The young man asked why. Liar said the forest expedition had drawn adventurers from all over, including the kingdom's most skilled. Even after 2 months of searching, they had found no ruins. While they talked, a masked adventurer lashed out at his opponent, who barely dodged and immediately countered with a precise kick. Shiro concluded everyone was at their limit, and Liar confirmed it. He added that the small town had few distractions, so frustration only grew. A man hiding under the table poked Shiro, immediately telling her not to open her shirt again, and she pouted as she promised never to do that in front of so many people. With a mischievous smile, she said Liar meant that when he talked about distractions, and Shiro still did not understand. A man laughed and admitted he was dense. She had been talking about brothels. Liar blushed with embarrassment and denied it, insisting it wasn't the case. Emil pressed him, asking why he was so flustered. Neska stomped on Liar's foot with her heel and scolded him for talking nonsense. Liar tried to explain himself. The sorcerers pressed down harder, causing the warrior to scream in pain. The adventurer's fight ended just as I walked through the door. Her powerful aura filled the hall and drew sharp looks. She asked what exactly was happening. Everyone in the fight froze and quickly said they weren't fighting. Nasaw Shuru apologized for appearing so suddenly, couldn't stop thinking how impressive she was, then noticed Amel hiding under the table and called her. A chill ran down the rabbit girl's spine. May smiled threateningly and demanded to know if she had been there the whole time and why she hadn't stopped the fight earlier, and the other woman tried to explain, but May refused to listen to excuses. Without delay, she dragged Amel outside as the rabbit girl screamed for Shuru to save his future wife, and Amel begged me to punish her in any way except a pay cut. Then when things calmed, Lyra approached Shuru and asked for a favor. He explained that while searching the forest for ruins, they had found some rare flowers. Then the group shared details about the mission and Shuru. He grew excited and said he would join them. Lyra asked if he was sure. The young man said he was, but added that they would need to protect him. The warriors smiled confidently, saying they were much stronger than before, and with that they moved forward. Everyone toasted again, clinking their mugs and celebrating joyfully. A gentle breeze moves across the flower-filled field, and Shuru feels deeply enchanted watching the flowers stretch across the landscape, so you smile when he remarks how truly wonderful and unique they are. Neska, a Roop sorceress, studies the flowers and in a calm, practiced voice explains they are called Apsara, a rare species that blooms only where the water is unquestionably pure, delicate, and fragile, but invaluable for crafting advanced healing potions. After the explanation, the group decides to lie down for a moment on the flower carpet to rest before resuming their mission, and Shuru looks up at the sky, wishing Ina were with them, knowing the little girl would have loved the field of vibrant flowers, picturing the sparkle in her eyes, and feeling a slight ache in his chest for not being able to share it with her. Across the field, Lyra crosses her arms and fixes the three companions with a disapproving look. The warrior teases that he expected Neska and Kulfa to nap at the first chance, and admits he was surprised to see Shuru so relaxed and almost asleep. The young man quickly apologizes and explains the long, tiring walk wore him out, and he just wanted a moment to rest. Lyra dismisses the excuse and insists they finish the job before sunset, so they can rest afterward as much as they want without any worries. The group received the mission a week earlier when members of the Azure Flash Guild first found the rare flowers. During the search, they discovered that the Apsara were essential ingredients for making high-level healing potions. The Apsara were highly sought after by doctors and healers across the kingdom. A major problem remained. Returning the flowers wilted quickly, losing all their properties before they could be delivered. Even with Neska caring for them, watering them, and using magic to preserve them, nothing worked. The group was about to give up on the Mies. When Lyra came up with a brilliant idea, he asked Shuru for help. The young man had a unique spatial storage ability that let him carry large quantities of any item without the weight being a problem, and everything stored there was frozen in time, so it never deteriorated or lost its properties. Lyra declared she had already collected enough flowers for the day, then noticed Kilfa had been asleep the whole time and unaware of the conversation. But before Lyra could bring her back to reality, Kilfa heard a strange sound, and her expression changed instantly. Gravely, she warns the group that something is approaching, and everyone immediately goes on high alert and draws their weapons. Soon a cloud of giant insects fills the sky, rhinoceros beetles that are massive and intimidating. Shiru's eyes widen when he sees the enormous insects and wire, and his mind quickly tries to count them, estimating at least 17, a number that offers little comfort. Lyra takes the lead and orders everyone to remain absolutely still and silent, and Shuru watches the beetles more closely, realizing many are injured with deep cuts on their bodies. Neska studies the scene and concludes the injuries were caused by a wind-cutting spell. Rolf, the brute's cleric, adds that the fluids dripping from the insects' bodies are still fresh, so the wounds are recent. Lyriel warned that the beetles had located the group before they could continue discussing what might have attacked the insects. With no other choice, she orders Rolf to protect Shuru as Neska prepares a spell, and the sorceress says she was already working on it. With a swift motion, she fires a powerful fire arrow from her staff. The impact sends several insects falling and burning to the ground. Rolf steps in front of Shuru and warns he will not let anything attack him. Kilfa then throws several sharp knives at the beetles, but to her surprise, the blades simply ricochet and cause no real damage. Before she could react, she found herself surrounded by insects and screams for Neska's help. Maintaining her composure, the sorceress casts a new spell and unleashes an even more intense fire blast. After burning a few more enemies, Shura realizes the insects are weak to fire and quickly devises a plan, then runs off, leaving Rolf worried. The cleric shouts at him not to do anything reckless and warns that the bear repellent he used earlier won't work on those monsters, but Shiro smiles and says he has something different in mind this time. The young man pulls a small lighter from his pocket, holds a can of gas spray, and lights both at once, producing a huge flame. Flames spread through the air and directly hit the beetles, turning them to ashes in seconds, while someone improvised a homemade flamethrower. Shiro looks at his companions and warns them this was extremely dangerous and no one should try it at home. Still impressed, Lyre asks whether that was magic. Before he could answer, Shiro signals Rolf to finish off one of the remaining insects. Obeying the order without hesitation, the cleric swings his powerful mace and crushes the monster's hard shell. Only 6 enemies were left. An optimistic Lyre says they were almost winning at that moment. Beetles begin to swarm and focus their attack on Nesca as Shura readies his improvised flamethrower again. You realize the sorceress is too close to the insects, and if you fire the flame it will hit her too, before you can think of another strategy. One of the beetles lunges at Nesca, and Shuru rushes in to push her out of the way. He takes the blow meant for her, the insect sinking its claws into his body. Lair screams desperately, ordering Shuru to jump into the river to get rid of the creature. With no other choice, Shuru obeys and dives into the water. The plan works, the beetle releases him, but the strong current now drags the young man. Nesca invoked the water spirits to shield the young man. Lyre panics when he realizes Shuru is being pulled toward the riverbank. Azure Flash's leader promises to find him and hopes Shuru will wait for them. Slowly regaining consciousness, Shiro hopes his friends will save him. A woman's voice calls to him, telling him to hold on. Sherbakov spits out the water he swallowed. The girl celebrates that he is alive. The young man is stunned because she was the fairy, and the girl interrupts him, asking if he had never heard of the fairy. Sherba asks, agitated, whether she is really a fairy, because he has never seen a real one before, and the tiny girl, no taller than a palm, has long hair and glowing wings that catch the light as she hovers near the young man, beating her small wings gracefully. Embarrassed, she tells him not to stare like that because it's embarrassing. Sheru realizes he was tactless and quickly apologizes. She crosses her arms and looks at him expectantly, asking if he has nothing to say, but the young man is confused. He fumbles for words and says it is a pleasure to meet her, but the fairy sighs in frustration and says that is not what she meant. Then she shakes her head and tells him she was the one who rescued him from the waterfall, and that without her he would have fallen and become fish food. And hearing this, Shuru thanks her at once and bows his head in respect. Hands on her hips, the girl asks what he was doing in the river as if it were some strange hobby. The young man quickly denies it and says it was a long story and everything happened very fast. After he tells his story, she shakes her head and says he really had been attacked by monsters and that it was very dangerous. She jokes that he's weak and asks where he came from. Shuri replies that he's from Menorich, a small town to the west of there. Her eyes widen in amazement as she repeats the name the Norwich. She calls it the home of humans and asks him to take her there. The young man looks surprised and asks why she's so curious and whether she's ever been to the town before. Pouting, the fairy asks whether that means no. The sheriff scratches his head and says he can take her, but first he wants to know if she knows anyone in town. She smiles and says she does. She knows a human guy. She spoke excitedly, saying he was a bit taller than Shuru, had beautiful eyes and a cool smile, and his eyes and hair were the color of the sky. Eagerly she asked if Shuru knew him, but the young man said being the same race didn't mean all humans knew each other, and then he asked what his name was. The little fairy grew thoughtful, shook her head, and admitted she did not know how to answer, explaining that before meeting Shuru that human was the only one she had met, so she simply called Kumin. Shuri thinks about it and imagines he might have been a hunter or an adventurer. The young man says the way she talks about him sounds almost romantic and asks if she and the human she mentioned were a couple. The fairy taps him lightly on the forehead and makes a face as if calling him an idiot. She says a fairy and a human could not have that kind of relationship, so they were just friends, though very good friends. A smile and a comment suggest they must have been best friends, and the fairy confirms without hesitation that they were. The young man paused to thank her and asked if she was familiar with the forest, since she seemed to know the area well. The fairy replied that she was, saying she had been born and raised in the Guyana forest. Seeing a great opportunity, he offers a deal, saying if she guides him through this part of the forest he will take her to Ninorich and asks her what she thinks. Her eyes sparkle with joy as she asks if he is serious and if he will really take her to the city. Without hesitation, she accepts the proposal, says she'll even protect Shuru along the way, and tells him to watch her technique. Raising one hand, the girl unleashes a wind-cut, powerful gusts that knock down even a few trees around them. Shiru's eyes widened in shock at the power of her attack. He asks if that was really necessary. The fairy puts her hands on her hips, saying she wasn't very good at controlling her magic, but that didn't matter because the most important thing was that she was really strong. To prove it, she flexes her arm as if showing off her strength. Proudly, she tells him that a group of rhinoceros beetles had attacked earlier, but she scared them off all by herself. Remembering everything that had happened, Shuro realizes she had been the one who injured the insects. He then says that finally the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. Shiro extends his hand, reminds her they had a deal, and formally introduces himself to the fairy. The girl rests her hand on her chin, shakes her head, says his name seems strange but she accepts it, and then introduces herself as Patty Folly Lou. Smiling, Shiro says he will be her commander from now on, but Patty crosses her arms and pouts, saying she does not like that and would rather he call her Chief. The young man laughs and says yes, Chief, playing along. Patty smiles, satisfied, and asks him to say it again. She calls to her chief in a loud voice, and the fairy grows excited, spinning in the air around him. Shiri watches her reaction and asks whether she liked the chief. Patty frowns and asks why he spoke that way. The young man hangs his head saying that's how lackeys talk, but Patty never said she disliked it, so he should stop. He suggests calling her captain, but she refuses, so Shura jokes again, calls her milady and says that as her servant he will do his best to fulfill her requests to repay her for saving his life, but she rejects that too. After Meg falls, they light a campfire. Sitting around it, Patty watches the flames dance and asks if Shuru misses his friends. The young man looks up at the starry sky and says he does, since they were his companions after all. While they were talking, his friends were probably searching for him. Excited, Patty says she has decided to help and to find his friends. Shuru asks if she was sure, but the fairy replies that as his chief that was her job and you should trust her to sort everything out. Then the fairy asks if the young man was hungry. Shura realized he hadn't eaten anything all day. Patty then put her hands on her hips and said that since he was her subordinate, she would give him something to eat. A sudden bright light blinds him. He blinks, and when his vision returns, Shuru looks stunned while Patty asks if something is wrong or if he is not hungry. But he only thinks that her storage ability makes it all more curious and impressive, and Patty conjures a large magic circle that pulses with intense energy before a portal opens in the air in front of her. With a gentle gesture, the fairy pulls a fruit from the portal, her eyes glowing with mischievous satisfaction as she stares at Shuru, who watches in surprise and disbelief, tilting her head with a curious smile as she remarks that he has never seen anyone use the inventory skill the way she does, and the young man's heart races as he realizes Patty also has this ability, which he thought was rare and exclusive. Before he can ask, the fairy explains in an excited, slightly proud tone that special abilities are common among fairies, and many share the same power of storing items in a personal magical space, and she keeps rummaging through her inventory, turning its invisible contents inside out and pulling out various objects with a thoughtful air. She finally finds a small, shiny glass bottle of golden liquid that shimmers in the light, and with a mischievous smile, the fairy offers Shuru a sip of the special mead she made. Her voice light and confident as she says it will warm him and help him relax, and though Shuru hesitates for a moment, the sweet, inviting aroma is irresistible, so he brings the bottle to his lips and takes a sip, feeling a comforting warmth spread through him and a sudden wave of intense pleasure. He says the mead is unbelievably delicious, and Patty beams with pride, confirming she made it herself and assuring Shuru he can drink as much as he wants because she has a large stored supply and there is no need to worry. Turning more serious and determined, the fairy says she will stand guard through the night to make sure nothing surprises them while they rest. In an authoritative but gentle tone, Hattie orders Shuru to finish his drink and lie down for a while, and to reinforce her authority she adds that it is a firm order. Shuru, already feeling relaxed and slightly drowsy from the alcohol, simply smiles gratefully. It obeys without argument, closes its eyes, and surrenders to the rest. The next morning, Patty perches comfortably on the young man's head as he wakes, and she tells him the forest is home to many races, some friendly and some not, warning about brutal orcs and huge, terrifying ogres. Intelligent creatures who lack cunning but make up for it with raw strength and aggression. Then, pointing with enthusiasm, she says if he looks that way he might find elves, mysterious, exotic beings who live in harmony with nature. And she adds that once, out of curiosity, she tried to approach their land, but they raised a magical barrier that kept anyone from entering or spying, so she got frustrated and left, grumbling about how closed off and reserved they were. Shuru listens attentively, then tilts his head back and sighs wearily, asking for a short rest because his legs are tired from so much walking, and the fairy crosses her arms and grumbles that he is asking to stop again, but after a moment she agrees as long as it is only brief. Resting, Petty notices an exotic flower, points it out, and in her expert tone tells him it is a babunia whose nectar tastes very peculiar and unpleasant, which furrows his brow in curiosity as the fairy keeps chattering excitedly. She told him she once accidentally drank this nectar and bitterly regretted it because the awful taste lingered in her mouth. And Shiri reflects on Patty's habit of talking about random subjects and filling his head with curious but often irrelevant information, and learns that long before Patty was born, the area was part of an ancient country. The nation fell into ruin, and over centuries, its cities were swallowed by a vast, impenetrable forest called the Forest of Ginna. Frowning, the young man asked if all this had happened during the era of the ancient magical civilization, and Patty replied impatiently that she could not know since it all took place long before she was born. Shiro sighs and stops arguing, but at that moment you suddenly become serious, and her sharp senses pick up a strange presence, so she immediately orders Shiro to hide quickly without asking questions. Distant shouts calling Shiro's name reach them before they can act, and the adventurers from Azure Flash are searching the forest for him. Rolf's voice rings out strongly, asking if he can hear them while Lyra sounds almost desperate, and he says emotionally that he would be very upset if Shiro was dead, but before he can continue Nesca hits him with her staff and scolds him for saying something so negative. The warrior wipes his tears and steadies himself, firmly saying he is sure Shiro is alive. Nesca softens, runs a hand over his head to comfort him, and confirms he was right and Shiro is fine. Hilfa moves quickly through the trays, searching for her friend. When Shura finally recognizes his companion's voices, he jumps up despite Patty's protests, and she calls him an idiot for revealing himself so soon. Shiro reassures her, saying they were his friends, his close companions. The young man then calls out to them that he is here. They all turn to him, then suddenly realized Kulfa was missing. A bird had carried the scout away. She'll be there as soon as she sees him. Striking the bird, she frees herself and falls toward him. With a thud, the cat lands, its ample bosom striking Shiri's face, and the group wonders what caused all the noise. Tears in her eyes, Kilful hugs the young man and says she thought he was dead. Kissing him, she promises she will never let him go. The group bows to Shiro, but the young man says he is fine and asks them to lift their heads. Regretful, Lyre apologized to him, saying he had promised to protect him, but had failed to keep that promise. Nesca says this was the second time he had saved her life and promises to repay the favor. It makes clear he's alive and back with his friends, so that's what matters. They try to protest. The young man interrupts and says they were friends. Lyre stammers that of course they were, and Kilfer agrees while calling their leader a fool. The others tease Lyre and laugh. Rolfin says he's impressed that Shira managed to make it back on his own. Shira says he wasn't exactly alone. Pointing to Patty hiding behind a tree, he leaves the adventurers amazed as Shira explains Patty is a fairy and his boss who saved his life. Shocked, the group asks him to explain. Fairies are extremely rare and known as the ghost tribe because they almost never interacted with other races. Shiro asks Patty if that is true. The fairy replies hesitantly that they were not supposed to leave their territory because it was against the rules. The young man says he assumed they were common because the guild was called the Blessing of the Fairies. Patty replies, annoyed, that there is no reason to give their blessing to humans. Shura snaps back that maybe a fairy once did bless a human. Nesca asks if he did not know, and the young man looks confused and asks what he did not know. Seeing the young man's ignorance, the sorceress explains that the Blessing of the Fairies was the name of an alcoholic drink made only by fairies, and it was also called Fairy Maid. Returning to Patty, she asks whether the drink was what Patty had given him, and the fairy confirms proudly. And Nesca, alarm jolts him as he wonders if he had really drunk fairy mead. Sherba hesitates between Lyre and Nesca as the group bombards him with questions. They doubt whether the young man really drank fairy mead, since one glass would buy a castle, and Rolf quickly adds that guild records show the last sale was 200 years ago. The young man is surprised to learn the drink was so rare, and Patty says she gave it to him because he was her subordinate. Confused by the situation, the warrior hears the sheriff say it's a long story, and after the sheriff tells his companions what happened, everyone is shocked that a fairy rescued him. Lyre approaches Patty to thank her for saving their companion, and with a grateful gesture, says he'd do anything to return the favor. Shiro offers to help them search for someone because the fairy's description was not helpful, and they welcome his help. With the adventurers finally gathered, they decide to head back to Nanorak. After walking for a while, they approach the city, and the fairy's eyes shine with admiration. Patty points and tells Shiro to look at the human's dwelling. The sorceress corrects her, calling it a city. Nesca explains that settlements have different names based on their size. The fairy repeats the words and says she understands. Lyra tells Shuru that being a subordinate is tough. Patty spots someone in the distance and asks who it is. As they come closer, Anna waits for Shuru at the city entrance. The little girl's face is desolate, and the young man, concerned, asks what she is doing there. Aina runs to hug him. Suddenly broke down in tears. Stella approaches and says he has finally arrived. Azure Flash says goodbye, while Aina's mother notes the little girl hadn't slept at all, too worried about Shiro. A young man offers to carry Anna, but Stella says it is unnecessary because the little girl will be too big for that in a few years. So she wants to carry her daughter while she still can. Shiro is worried because Stella seems tired, and Yura retorts that she could tell him if it ever became too much for her. Firmly, she refuses to speak or to hand Anna over because Anna is her daughter. After escorting them home, the young man says goodbye and wishes Anna a good night's sleep, and as he turns to leave, Stella calls him back, saying she forgot something. Stella welcomes him into her home. Make sure returns go to the shop. Patty is stunned by how big the place is. A young man asks what kind of houses fairies live in, and Patty says they build their homes high in the trees so monsters cannot reach them. Changing the subject, the fairy asks Shuru if he still remembers their agreement. Shuru says he does and will help her find her friend, noting that in a small town it won't take long. Excited, they promise to search the next day and bump fists. Shuru asks the fairy to make the delicious maid who gave him her heart, and Patty says it's very easy as long as you have honey. Getting honey is a hassle. The last time she tried to collect some, bees attacked her and she almost died. As she talks, the young man opens his backpack and pulls out a jar of honey. He asks if that will work. Patty sees the jar, confirms, and is impressed that he managed to get some. Looking closer, she is stunned and can hardly believe it's honey, and Shuru confirms it's 100% pure, straight from the hive. The fairy dips her finger into the honey and tastes a little, surprised at how delicious it is. Excited, she claims her mead would taste even better with that honey, and Shuru asks if it really would. The young man says it's time to rest, and that he is sore from sleeping on the forest floor. Morning comes and Shuru sleeps on the couch with a fairy perched on his head when Aina appears and wakes them. The young man asks what she is doing there when Stella tells him he will not be opening the shop that day. The little girl says she brought him food. Aina steps closer, curious, and asks who the girl sitting on the young man's head is. Shuru tells her it's his new boss Patty and that she's a fairy, and his eyes light up with amazement. She asks if she is like the fairies in picture books. Patty asks who that child is, and the young man introduces Aina as his assistant at the shop. The fairy changes the subject and asks the little girl if she knows a man with blue hair and blue eyes. Anna says she doesn't and has never seen anyone like that, leaving Patty downcast. Shiro steps in and says he and Ina don't know all the residents. It's a small town, so he figures they'd find him if they asked around. He asked Patty if she wanted to start the search right away, and Anna offered to help, clearly excited. Patty asks if the girl really wants to help, and Anna says yes, making the fairy very happy as it gives a little squeal. Shura then says they first need to find a way to hide the fairy, and Anna suggests hiding the fairy in her backpack, and the fairy settles comfortably in the girl's bag. Everything settled, they set off to look for Patty's friend. Shira walks up to several people. They showed him a photo of a pendant necklace, but no one recognized it. The Elle at the town hall pretends not to know if she has seen him before, and says it would be easier if they had a name. Gerald the merchant doesn't recognize any of the goods he sells. Neither the dog, the mercenary, nor the bar knows whose it is. Shuri examines the picture, intrigued, because he asked 27 people, and none of them recognized the pendant. Aina thinks the fairy's friend might not be from this city, but Patty remembers he said exactly, "I live in Nineric." With only the matching necklaces to go on, Shira took a picture of Patty's pendant to show the townspeople. Karen bursts in looking for the young man and, pointing out she heard he joined Lyre's group on another adventure, she scolds him and asks when he will stop making her worry. The young man apologizes, but Karen says he doesn't have to. She just says she's glad he's okay. Anna ruffles his hair and says his face is bright red, but Shira insists he's just hot. To change the subject, he shows Karen a picture of the pendant, and she studies it closely. It feels familiar, but she can't remember where she saw it. Karen, the mayor, tells him she will come back to tell him if she remembers anything. The young man asks if she would really do him that favor. Smiling, Karen says she still owes him for all the times he helped her. Saying goodbye, she mentions she'll still stop by the guild. Someone asks if she is going to see a mill, but Karen says no. She will confront the Azure Flash group, the people who put her dear friend in danger. She seems unthreatening, and the young man hurriedly says he offered to go, but the mayor simply turns to leave. Shura, frightened, hopes his friends Lyre, Neska, Rolf, and Kulthar are okay. As soon as Karen leaves, Anna asks Shura if Patty could sleep in her bed with her. The young man asked the fairy what she thought, and Patty hesitantly admits she doesn't mind staying with the little girl, but only for that mate. Shiro calls her a little sundeer fairy. Anna comes home holding her backpack carefully and tells her mother she's going to show her something. However, she'll need to keep a secret. Stella hesitates briefly, then agrees to keep it and asks what it is. The little girl says it's in her bag, and Stella guesses a lizard or a frog, but Stella is surprised when the girl opens the backpack. Inside rests the little fairy, and Patty bombards Stella, asks whether she is Anna's mother, saying the eye color makes her look just like the little girl. Realizing a fairy stands before her, Stella freezes in shock and Anna grows worried. Jumping onto the bed, Sharuba offers Stella an inay. Patty bounces and says she has never slept on anything so soft. Stella brings a few cups of tea to share and then asks what sort of person the young man Patty mentioned was. Anna says she wants to know too. The fairy falls silent for a moment and shyly promises to tell everything. It began when the fairy left her territory for the first time, and a young man was hunting a unicorn rabbit in the forest. Patty wasn't sure what he was using, but it made a twig fly incredibly fast. The young man was terrible with the bow, and every miss left his face like he was about to cry. Looking like a little kid, he made Patty laugh until her stomach hurt. Eventually, she grew tired of the crying and stepped in, delivering a precise strike to the unicorn rabbit. The young man stared at her with wide eyes. They first met when he asked if she was a fairy. After their sudden meeting that ate the unicorn rabbit, the young man kept crying and saying how good it was. At first, the fairy found human taste strange after trying their food and finding it unappetizing. The young man then said he hadn't eaten properly for about 10 days. Grateful, the young man thanked the fairy for saving his life and asked her name. Hesitating because she remembered how others had mistreated her, she said she would tell him once he got better at hunting. The days passed. They hunted together until one day they became really good. The young man asked Patty whether he had not been tested a lot and whether she would now speak on her behalf. The fairy grew excited and started to introduce herself, but as she was about to say her name, she remembered being called a cursed child. Unable to reveal it, she said she would tell him another time. The young man became worried but didn't press her. That turned out to be the last time they saw each other. Patty tells Anna that he was her friend and that he always said they were lonely, but when they met, they were lonely together. Determined, the fairy says she needs to find him to tell him her name and ask for his name as well. Patty says she ended up rambling a lot. Water hits her and she asks if it is raining. Anna turns to her with tears in her eyes and promises they will definitely find her friend. Moved, the fairy looks at the little girl and agrees that they will find him. 2 hours earlier, Shuru steps out of a portal wearing only underwear and a towel, decides nothing beats a hot bath at home, and goes to the shop's balcony to watch the sunset. Lyre appears suddenly and calls for his attention. The young man asks him to wait and says he will come down to meet him. When he approaches, Shiri grows concerned because the warrior's face is swollen as if he'd been beaten. The young man asks what happened to Lyre, and the warrior says it's nothing. Karen appeared at the guild very upset. Lyra asked whether she had come there just to yell because they had taken Shuru on a dangerous adventure. The mayor replied that she would not make any exceptions, so the warrior suggested Karen slap or punch him if that would make her feel better. Karen slaps Lyre across the face with all her strength, knocking the warrior off balance. Azure Flash's leader invites Shuri to drink at the guild, mentions Ami and the guildmaster will be there, and Shuri agrees that it sounds fun. At the guild bar, the group raises their glasses in celebration as Lyre counts down and everyone cheers when it ends, with Kulfa, Emil, and May lifting their glasses too. Shuru and Lyre take big gulps of their drinks while Rolf watches. The young man grows thoughtful. Lyre asks if something is wrong. Ni asks whether he dislikes the beer, and Shuru, embarrassed, admits that's exactly it and apologizes. Nay says it's unnecessary, and she doesn't like it either. Emmy asks whether it's serious, and the guildmaster says yes but can't say it out loud. There weren't many alcoholic drink options, and offering better ones might have eased adventurers' frustration. It was sad, but the benefits didn't justify the cost. Kilfa says she would still like a little wine or cider, which might be a bit sour but smells great. Neska interrupts to warn her not to ask for too much. Shuru asks whether the wine there is really sour. The liar, already a bit drunk, asks whether he's never had wine or whether the incredible merchant only drinks fancy wines. Shura says he hasn't, but back home good wine was inexpensive. He tells them there were 3 types of wine, red, white, and rosé, and the adventurers are amazed. Shiru said he had even heard of orange wine, and each type had its own character. Some were sweet and some dry, some refreshing and others strong and full-bodied, with prices ranging from a few coins to enough to buy a house with a garden, and people who knew about it chose different types for different meals, while he preferred sake, which like wine came in varieties such as ginger and jamai. Shiru suddenly notices everyone in the bar is watching him, and an older adventurer asks him to continue. The young man explains his homeland traded with many countries, so they had many kinds of drinks. People around him stare with sparkling eyes as Shiro pauses. Think about how this was a great business opportunity. If you acted correctly, you could accomplish 3 things at once. The young man turns to the crowd and he asks them to come back in 3 days and promises to bring drinks from his homeland for everyone. At that moment, Shiro looked different from usual as he slicked his hair back and put on elegant clothes like a bartender's. Aina tells him he looks very stylish, and he thanks her and says she looks great. Stella also says he looks very nice, and he replies that she looks beautiful and very professional. One night he set up a small bar at the end of the guild's recreation hall. Lyre arrived saying everyone looked elegant, and he asked whether Anna was helping out there too. They greeted each other. Sherry didn't want the little girl working at the bar, but the girl insisted on helping and even brought her mother along. Nesco announced that everything was ready. The sorceress had made ice with her magic, and Kilful was serving drinks. He made sure each of them had their preferred drink. Nesca chose chocolate liquor, Kilfa picked fruit wine, and the young man asked if Anna wanted a drink too. She hesitates and says she wants gin. The little girl smiles and says she actually wants ginger ale, a soda. A crowd then asks if they can drink now. Sheru thanks them for their patience. The celebration begins, and he politely introduces himself as Shiro, the owner of Shiro's shop. Schubert says he brought drinks from his shop to liven things up after the forest missions, and some people say it was only a few bottles. Not even the richest merchant in the city would have that many, while Schubert adds he also brought plenty of snacks, and other adventurers speculate he might be an alchemist, though no one really cares because everyone just wants good drinks. Shiro says everything is free and drinks are unlimited. The crowd cheers, and the young man, thinking he spent 3 million yen on goods, feels nervous. Seeing it as an investment, he calls Guildmaster Namaraj to say a few words. Nay greets everyone warmly and asks them to enjoy the night while staying fit to work the next day. Hungry, the adventurers cheer and jostle to place their orders, crowding Shiro into a corner. Nee stamps the ground firmly after noticing the chaos. Her tone is intimidating, as if she could cancel the event if they preferred. Shiro thanks her for the help, and the crowd forms lines. Lyre is served first and confidently asks what the warrior would like to drink, then points at a bottle and asks what it is, and the young man explains it is bottled beer and highly recommends it. Following the recommendation, Lyre picks the drink, and Anna says squeezing lemon juice into it would make it taste even better. Azure Flash's leader follows the little girl's suggestion, and when he tastes the drink, he is amazed by its flavor. It is fizzy and light, and the lemon's tang makes it even better. He takes a big gulp from the mug. Shiro says it would be even better with a pinch of salt, and everyone around asks for the same drink. Customers love the drink. Shiro asks Stella for the bottle on his right and asks her to fill it with a Mexican drink. Exhausted, the young man sees everything going well and everyone enjoying it, until the next customer walks up and asks for a strong drink with a smirk. He asks for the strongest drink they have, and the Sun adventurers recognize him as Eldos the Indestructible, one of the 16 heroes. Shiro questions whether he really wants the strongest drink and suggests Spirius, a drink so strong it could start a fire. He serves it in a small glass. Eldos complains about the size, glares at Shiro, calls him a kid, and says he's over 200 years old to be treated like a child. Shiro says the drink is so strong one sip could knock him down. It has an alcohol content of 96%, but Eldos gets even more offended and insists he has never been drunk in his life. The young man tells him to calm down because drinking so much could kill him. The adventurer sighs and says he'll see how far this goes. Removing his cloak, he tells Shiro that if he wants a fight, they can settle it outside the bar, and Rolf steps forward to introduce himself as a humble cleric. Eldos turns to him and asks whether the priest is there to give a sermon, complaining that the kid insulted his pride as a dwarf by claiming dwarves drink straight from barrels and have alcohol in their veins from birth. And calmly Rolf says he understands how Eldos feels, and if Eldos will allow it, would like to offer a suggestion. The dwarf asks what the suggestion is, and the cleric says he can use a healing spell, usually used for poison, that will also ease the symptoms of intoxication. Turning to Shirov, he offers to revive Eldos if the alcohol makes him sick, asks if that would be acceptable, and they all agree. Elda said they thought the drink would bring him to his knees, but he had fought dangerous monsters his whole life, defeating the demon lord and the ancient dragon, so it would not because his knees had never touched the ground. The crowd cheers at the mention of legendary monsters, and for the dwarf among the 16 heroes, Shiru suddenly notices Eldo's looks much bigger, and Eldo's asks for the drink. The dwarf offers a bet, saying if he gets drunk, Shiru may demand anything from him, and when the young man asks what happens if the dwarf loses, Eldo's replies that Shiru must buy him drinks for life. Then Eldo's holds out his mug and tells the young man to fill it until it overflows. Shiru agrees to the bet, and the dwarf sniffs the drink, noting its very strong smell, far stronger than any he's had before. He tells the mother about the crowd's curious gaze, squeezing every last drop from it. Shiru froze when the dwarf sighed, said his stomach felt like it was on fire, and set the mug on the counter. Eldo's challenges the young man, asking if he looks drunk. Sherwin rubs the back of his neck and admits he underestimated him and lost the bet. Eldo's laughs and says the young man now owes him free drinks whenever he wants. He keeps laughing until he collapses backward onto the floor, completely drunk. A young man scolds Eldo's, saying he had warned him not to drink so much at once. If Rolf hadn't been there, Eldo's might have died, hero or not. That had been disrespectful to alcohol. The dwarf agrees, and the nearby adventurers say they had never seen Eldo's embarrassed before. After so many battles, alcohol had finally brought him down. The adventurers asked what the drink was called. One guessed it was something like Spy Something, and they discussed renaming it Hero Killer. Shura did not know it would sweep across the continent like a storm. The Guildhall was full of adventurers sprawled on the floor after drinking too much, and with a flushed face Nesca says she had never drunk anything so good in her life. Kilfas says she wants to take some back to her companions in her homeland, and the sobbing liar asks if they had really drunk all of Shiru's stock. Shiru says he spent a fortune, but now every adventurer will be hooked on his drinks. Liar watches, impressed, and says this is the famous merchant he heard about. He's happy if the event eased some of the tension. At that moment, two adventurers start fighting, but are so drunk they just fall asleep together, and he adds that this matters especially since Anna makes many deliveries to the guild. Hidolfa pats Shero on the back and says he's really a good guy. The young man says it hurt, but the cat insists she didn't hit him that hard. Liar asks what the real goal that night was, and the warrior stares into a box, saying he saw fairy wings peeking out. He turns to her and asks whether her forehead has appeared. Patty looks down and says no, he hasn't. The young man says he must not be an adventurer, and the fairy starts to apologize. Since Shira had done all that for her, the young man and the warrior look at her with sympathy. Several days passed, and they still had no sign of Patty's friend. Showing the pendant to everyone in the city got him nowhere, and putting up posters had no effect, so that would probably tell the fairy he had left the city. There are many other human cities beyond that one. Patty asked if there would be about 20. Anna said it was far more than that and spread her arms. Patty looked sad because she had not expected so many and did not know how she would find her friend until Karen knocked on the door calling for Shuru. The mayor's presence surprises the young man, and Karen's serious expression suggests she may have learned the man's identity. She says she thought she had seen the pendant before, searched her house, found a small box, and took out a necklace with a pendant identical to Patty's, which Shira recognizes instantly. The mayor says the jewel belonged to her great-great-grandfather, who was the first mayor of Menorich. Aina asks what a great-great-grandfather is, and Shuru replies that it is the grandfather of your grandfather. Karen wonders why they were looking for her great-great-grandfather, and the fairy interrupts, saying it was because she asked. Surprised to see a fairy, the mayor asks what is happening. The young man tells the whole story, and Karen can hardly believe it. A fairy once knew one of her ancestors. Patty then asks where he was, but the mayor does not understand what she means. The fairy says Karen is the daughter of the son of her friend's son, so Karen confirms they are related, and Patty adds that Karen should know where he was then. Karen is confused until she finally understands, then asks Patty how long a fairy typically lives. Patty says her clan lives about 3,000 years, but she is only 300, and the mayor says that for humans, reaching 100 years is already very lucky. Her great-great-grandfather died many years ago. Patty is stunned and recalls how everyone rejected her. Nobody ever cared about her. Her own parents hated her, and she concluded that if she left, nobody would notice. On a full moon night, she broke the rules and flew out of the territory until she found her friend. For the first time, someone looked at her with kind, tender eyes, thanked her, and smiled. At last, she had someone to play with and fight alongside. For the first time, someone had risked their life to keep her safe. This was the first time anyone had given her a gift. The pendant served as a token of their friendship. She remembered the precious moment with him, when someone who had never had a friend suddenly found a best friend. For the first time, she cried with joy, and when he asked her name, she felt a sudden fear of losing something. A small voice in her head warned that giving him her name would end the friendship. Too frightened to introduce herself, she always said she would tell him her name another time, and he never pressured her, saying he looked forward to when that time came. Patty pauses, absorbing that her friend is dead, and says the only place she ever felt she belonged was at his side, while Aina and Shuru watch her with sympathy. When asked whether she plans to stay or return to the other fairies, the downcast fairy says she has nowhere to go and admits she had kept a secret. In truth, she had been exiled from the fairy territory. She lifts her shirt to show him the mark branded on her belly. Sherba asks what it is, and she explains the symbol marks her as a walking disaster to the fairies. Patty says she always felt life would have been better if she had never been born, and even her parents hated her for that, but she still lived a fairly normal life. Then a group of rhinoceros beetles built nests near the fairies' territory, and hundreds of them began hunting the fairies for food. Once the nest was built, they reproduced quickly and could move away as long as the food supply lasted. The other fairies blamed Patty, and Shirago was outraged, saying they had used her as a scapegoat, and it wasn't Patty's fault the monsters had made their nest there. Patty says it was actually her fault because of the curse, and the clan leader named her Patty Falulu. In the fairy language, it meant one who cuts through destiny. Aisuke gave her the name so the curse would not control her, yet he still exiled her. Patty points out that this is ironic. Shiro explains that this happened when she saved him. The fairy says she did it because she thought the stupid human would help her find her friend. In the end, Anna was the biggest fool of all. Anna stares at the fairy with tears in her eyes while Patty gently pats her head and tells her not to cry, because if the little girl cried, Patty would cry too. Then they embrace and cry. Shiro steps forward and asks if he can ask a question, then asks Patty if he would like to save the fairies. She promptly says she will. Shiro asks if she still wants to after being expelled. Looking down, she says she must repay the leader for naming her and that her parents still live there. Despite their hatred, they were still her parents, so she wanted to help. Moving close to the little fairy, Shiro asks why they do not go there to save them. Patty asks if he could really do that, and the young man smiles and confirms he can. Patty pleads with him to save the other fairies, and Aina joins in asking Shiro for help. The young man says they will succeed and will go there. First, they head to the Adventurers Guild. When they reach the guild, several adventurers whisper about Shira's request to defeat the rhinoceros beetles. The knight tells him she understands the request. She fears she cannot accept the mission because it is completely impossible. Shiro is taken aback, and Aina and Patty look devastated behind him, and the guildmaster explains that destroying a nest of rhinoceros beetles is a huge task, so they could mobilize at least half of the guild's adventurers for the mission. The young man worries about the cost of hiring so many people, but Naya says cost is not the only problem. They don't have enough influence. Most adventurers are out in the forest searching for ruins. If the nests were near the city, that might help, but the fairies' territory is far away, so they cannot mobilize the adventurers. The guildmaster apologizes that she can't do anything. Turning away, she says she has other things to take care of, but Shira doesn't give up. The young man tells her to wait and suggests they treat the case not as a job request but as a transaction. Nay looks confused, so he asks her to pay attention. He activates his inventory ability, opening a portal in front of her. Maggie is shocked by what she sees, and Shira says this is the inventory ability and that it is his proposal. Once the adventurers find the ruins, he will use his ability to transport items, armor, and similar gear, so even if his request takes days, they won't lose time exploring. The young man asks the guild master what she thinks. Nay calls it a tempting offer, and it makes him hopeful. However, she has an enchanted item with an inventory ability, proving she can open an inventory, and Shiru's shock and Nay say her ability can hold at least 3 wagons. Interfield is sorry for him, and Nay again apologizes for being unable to accept the request. Eldos appears and interrupts her, asking what is going on. Eldos asks if the young man is in trouble, while Shuru asks if he is being too loud and apologizes afterward. The young man says he really needs to exterminate the rhinoceros beetles in the forest. The dwarf pauses for a second, then says he has nothing more to add. Eldos is in. Shuru looks confused and asks whether he is serious about it and why he wants to help. The dwarf asks whether he has really forgotten that there was a bet. The young man then says he remembers. The eldest grumpily concludes that he had really forgotten. Shuru says he doubts it because Nay had just said it was a very large mission. The dwarf raises his axe, crumbling. He tells him not to compare him to those weaklings because he can handle the beetles alone without breaking a sweat. Lara suddenly appears and says he hurt everything, and the Azure Flash group offers to go as well. Nay interrupts, brandishing her sword angrily, warning that the contracts forbid taking any request not approved by the guild and that off-the-books jobs will be punished. But Eldos cuts her off saying she misunderstood, and Lyra tells her the dwarf is right. Eldos lost a bet, so helping Shiro was his payment. Kilfad jokes that the dwarf fell in a very dramatic way. Eldos tells her to be quiet. Meanwhile, Litter says his group are Shiro's friends and will help him without asking for payment. Neska the sorceress lifts a finger and explains that since they are not asking for payment, this is not a job request. Kilfa clings to Shiro and says that if their companions needed them, they would help. The young man is moved by his friend's words. He thanks them, promising that once they defeat the monsters they will celebrate with those drinks. Some passing adventurers hear this and ask whether helping would let them drink more of Shiro's beverages. The young man says it depends. While organizing his stock he found a bottle of fairy mead. The adventurers were amazed he owned that legendary drink and volunteered for the mission with many others signing up, and Nay looked around nervously and said she would not allow it as everyone should be searching for the rumens. Pointing at the young man, she asked what proof he had that he owned the mead, and Patty spoke from inside Aina's backpack, revealed herself, and confirmed he had it. Knowing this because she had made it herself, Shiro asked why the chief had come out of hiding. Nay is shocked to see the fairy asking the young man what was happening. The young man sighs and explains that Patty is his boss, and that in truth, she wanted to get rid of the rhinoceros beetles, while the fairy only wanted to save the others of her kind, but he was just a merchant and couldn't face dangerous monsters alone. Determined, he bows before the guildmaster and pleads for Nay to save the fairies, tears filling his eyes. Joining him, she bows and begs them to save Patty's family. The fairy says that if they defeat the beetles, she will brew mead for everyone. Someone implores Nay to help the fairies, leaving her in a difficult position as she says Shiro was cruel for making her look like a villain. The guildmaster then orders all bronze-level adventurers to prepare for battle. Knowing they would destroy the rhinoceros beetle nest, she ordered everyone to follow her to the geeing of the forest, and the adventurers set out with determination. After walking a while, Patty says they've arrived. Shiro is stunned when a fairy points to the dungeon entrance and says the nest is inside. Patty explains that the monsters trapped the fairies so they could not leave. A few starving fairies appear at the cave mouth, too frightened to come out. Shiro turns to Lyre and asks if this is really true. Before me lay the ruins of the ancient magical civilization the guild had been searching for. A fairy said the strange cave had always been there. Her clan leader claimed it was a structure built by some civilization long ago. I can hardly believe my eyes. Dreams can really come true. She unfolds a map and presents her plan, ordering them to split into 3 rank-based groups with the priority of avoiding casualties. The 6 mithril-ranked adventurers would launch a surprise attack into the ruins. The 17 gold-level adventurers would eliminate any monsters emerging from the entrance, and the 15 silver-level adventurers would exterminate any that managed to escape. She keeps instructing Eldos, saying that as a platinum-ranked adventurer he should stay behind for emergencies, but Shiri warns he is entering the nest alone as the dwarf suddenly runs off yelling, his eyes wide with shock. Right after that, the other adventurers copy him, angering Nea, who curses the hot-headed group, orders the Azure Flash to stay and protect Shiro and Patty, gets assurances they will handle it, and then announces a change of plans. She orders everyone to follow Eldos into the nest and to lure the monsters out of the ruins. The adventurers fight a decisive battle against the monsters. Shiro checks his watch, sees 2 hours have passed since they entered and hopes everyone is safe. Then Ney appears and the young man rushes to her and asks how the mission is going, but Eldos bursts into laughter and questions what Shiro takes him for. The dwarf, his trusty axe on his back, says he didn't even break a sweat. Ney confirms that Ed alone defeated almost all the beetles, and the guildmaster says she saw it herself and assures them there are no living monsters left. Shiro is stunned, unable to believe Eldos killed hundreds of monsters alone. Lyra agrees it's absurd, and the young man asks whether the monsters had a queen bee as their final boss. The dwarf says he has no idea, and that if they did, he must have crushed it with the others. Then he turns to Ney, says he's starving, and asks whether they brought any meat and drinks. Sheer returns to Patty and says this is good news. Patty stammers in agreement, and the young man asks whether she will tell the other fairies, and just as she is about to answer, she is interrupted. He hears a cry for help. She asks if she heard it, but he doesn't know what she means. Then she realizes something and flies off, saying she has to go. The young man becomes worried and runs after her. Lara asks where he's going, but suddenly they hear noises, and a small fairy flies in, crying for help. Patty arrives to find a little fairy caught in the monster's claws as it prepares to attack the beetle. She hesitates because using magic could hurt the fairy, so she strikes the monster and orders it to release her. The beetle throws her off. Shiro rushes over worried, and Kilfa leaps onto the monster, saying she knows its weak spot, stabs the insect with her blade, and frees the little fairy, who falls. At that moment, Nesca conjures an ice spear and strikes the monster. Patty flies to the fallen fairy, catches her, and asks if she is okay. The fairy says she is fine and thanks the sorceress and the scout for their help. Just then, Lyre looks around for them and asks if they're all right. He and Rolf were being attacked by monsters. The warrior says the area is infested with insects. They keep pouring out of the nest without stopping. The group is surrounded. Nay is stunned because she just watched the dwarf take them all down. An adventurer approaches and says he found an opening at the back of the nest, which they missed because the monster carcasses had blocked their view. She says he must be joking. This was a failure on her part as guildmaster. Patty warns that if they don't stop them, the fairies will be in danger. Shiru asks to use her previous magic. Lyra says the enemies are endless, and seeing the young man holding Patty, asks what he is doing. Shiru checks the fairy is ready since they must act together. The fairy confirms she is. The young man and Patty steady his improvised flamethrower and unleash a massive blast of fire. Incinerated, the monsters fall and the pair sees their plan worked, perhaps too well since they had aimed at the sky. Lara asks whether the young man is really sure he's not actually a great mage, but Nesca interrupts and points in a direction. A much larger monster has appeared in the sky, its teeth sharp and terrifying. Lyra reels in shock, and Nesca says that it must be the queen. Kilfa, frightened, says the queen is huge. Shiru asks Patty to cast that spell again. The fairy replies she can and will finish off this pest easily, and Rolf warns that she is coming in. As the queen beetle raises her massive jaws to strike, Shiru and Patty hesitate, and Eldos uses his special attack, Thunder of Justice, delivering a series of electric blasts to the monster. As the wounded queen begins to fall, the dwarf apologizes for keeping them waiting, and when someone says, "Thanks, Eldos," he replies that thanks are unnecessary because he was only repaying a debt. It had been a long time since the dwarf had gone all out with his trusty battle axe sequel, given to him by the immortal witch, and intrigued by Eldo's words, Shiru asks whether the word justice is engraved on the axe. Ella says it is, and that thanks to Sigil he can use justice magic twice a day. The young man remembers his grandmother was a big fan of an action series called Real Justice, starring actor Steven Sigil. An elder asks how the young man knows, and Shiru tells him everything, and the dwarf says he is Alice Gawamio's grandson, and that they do look a bit alike, when a voice calls for Patty. The fairy asks what is going on there. Turning around, she sees the clan leader. Several fairies stepped out from behind the trees. Lyra is surprised by how many there are, and Nesca finds them all adorable. The clan leader, in a deep voice, asks why Patty is there after she was exiled, and why the humans are fighting the beetles, and an outraged Patty says he has no right to care, because he expelled her from their territory, and she owes him no answer. Introducing himself to the leader, Shura says Patty saved his life. She asked him to clear out the monsters and rescue the fairies. The elder asks whether Patty has returned to save them, and notes the irony that the bearer of the curse is saving their lives. Nesca interrupts to ask about the curse, and Patty shows the birthmark on her belly, explaining that if a fairy is born with that mark, a calamity will befall their people. Fascinated, the sorceress recognizes it as a seal. Nestor explains that in the guild the symbol was called a seal, and anyone born with the mark was blessed with great magical abilities. Long ago, many seal bearers suffered because they could not control their powers, and the magic consumed them. That was long ago, when people discovered anyone could master magic by learning the basics, and today most who have that power have become sorcerers and risen to the highest ranks among magic users. Some remote tribes still held false beliefs and prejudice about the seals, but the seals were not to be feared and were actually a gift from the gods, which left the tribe elder stunned because that proved the legend wrong, and Nesca offers to teach Patty the basics of magic, having learned them at the Magic Academy, as Patty moves and the sorceress tells her. If she learns to control her powers, she can help the fairies on her own next time. The clan leader apologizes to Patty for all the suffering she endured, and as both leader and her grandfather, he feels ashamed of his actions. The fairy is surprised when the elder kneels before her, apologizing for everything. She told him to stop apologizing, and reassured him that if he had not expelled her, she would never have met Shuru, and would not have been able to save everyone. So in a way, everything had worked out, and the elder had been right after all. Although the other fairies feel ashamed, Patty tells them they did nothing wrong. Later, they return to Shuru's shop, and the young man asks if Patty was really going to return to the fairy kingdom. The fairy says she came because her grandfather asked her to. Aina, crying, says she doesn't want to say goodbye to Patty. Patty explains that humans live short lives, so if she stayed she would eventually lose them and be alone again. Essentially, she had come only to find her friend. He claims he understands, and the fairy thanks them for everything they did for her. Karen rushes in and hands her a letter, saying she found it among her great-great-grandfather's belongings. The letter was addressed to her friend. Patty asks her to open it. The fairy's friend begins by saying Patty was his dearest friend. He says it had been a long time since they promised me again. The seasons had changed and the years had flown by. Always teasing him about his thin arms, she would surely mock him now that they were even thinner. Barely able to walk, let alone run, he still dreamed of running through the forest with her. Moved by the letter, Patty continues reading and says he met an elf a few years ago who told him that fairies live much longer than humans. He asked the elf to translate your name for him, the name that cuts through fate, Patty Folly Lou. Finding it beautiful, he repeated it as he wrote the letter. He then told her he hadn't given his name yet. It was Sankarika, and he thanked Patty for being part of his life, from her friend Aaron Sankarika. Shireva excitedly asks Patty whether she made the mead herself or used a secret fairy recipe. Patty says no, it was very simple and offers to teach him. First, Patty takes a little bit of honey and puts it in her mouth. After the fairy spits everything into a bottle, she chews and talks with her mouth full. Shira thinks how cruel reality can be. Holding her ancestor's letter, Karen says Patty greatly helped her great-great-grandfather, and the fairy, moved, says her friend's name was then Aaron. He even managed to learn her name, which was not bad, and she remembers the time they spent together and says they were each other's only friend. He fell in love and even had children and great-grandchildren. Shurba confirms this. Tearful, Patty says she is very happy he lived a joyful life. Shura tells her that humans don't live long, but time doesn't matter for friendship. The young man says Aaron still holds a place in Patty's heart and always will. Wiping her tears, the fairy agrees and adds that Karen has moved on too. The young man asks the fairy to keep him and Ina in her heart, even if only in a small corner, and reaches into his pocket. He takes out a photo of himself with Ina and Patty, all smiling and making peace signs, and says everyone in the photo is his friend, his best friends in fact. Patty grows emotional and Ina agrees, crying that she and the fairy are companions. When the Azure Flash adventurers arrive, Lyre smiles and calls them friends. Kilfalots from Meow says they are lucky to be friends with the fairy, and Nesca approaches with a serious look to tell Patty she understands how the fairy feels since, as a half-elf, she will live much longer than humans. Even so, she loves Lyre and does not fear her feelings. Lyre watches her as the sorceress says she knows every moment with him will be etched into her heart forever. Nesca asks the fairy what she will do, and Patty determined. She replies that she's not afraid of anything and will stay with them, since the clan leader never said when she'd return. Nesca promised to teach her magic, and Patty couldn't abandon that crybaby, Ina. She explains time passes differently for them, so she will only return to her kingdom when Shuru dies of old age. The young man laughs awkwardly and says he's not close to that yet. Tearful Aina hugs Patty, who is startled and protests that the girl shouldn't hug her like that without warning. The matter was settled. 2 months flew by, and the harvest festival finally arrived as the city stood decorated and bustling. Sherivan had promised the mayor to help with the festival, so he told Aina to photograph the attendees while he and Karen auctioned some items. A young man enthusiastically announced a bottle of spiritus, a hero-killing drink, calling out the bids as a crowd competed fiercely for each auction item. Shiru announces the final item, a drink so delicious that only those blessed by a fairy can taste it. The young man licks a bottle of meat and continues his speech, saying it was made by Patty, then announces the city's new tourism ambassador is the fairy, who looks a bit shy as Shuru asks for a big round of applause for her. The starting bid was a gold coin, and the young man keeps raising the stakes. After the auction, Karen and Shuru sit on a bench in the plaza while he celebrates the successful sale. On top of that, you see the mayor make a funny expression as he recalls the face she made when the mead was sold. Karen protests, saying anyone would react that way after getting so much money because he had sold the drink for 50 gold coins, and Smile says this will do wonders for the city's economy. The mayor thanks Shuru, saying none of this would have been possible without him. Shuru replies bashfully that he only had the idea and that Patty made the drink, so Karen should thank her instead. The mayor agrees and Patty approaches them. Watching them talk, the fairy says she just remembered something and wants to ask a question, and Patty casually asks whether they could have a baby. Shrew flushes and asks what she means. Karen, her face reddening, says they are not even in a relationship. The fairy explains that Stella told her about reincarnation, so if the two of them had a baby, their friend might be reincarnated. Growing more embarrassed, Shiru says humans must go through certain ceremonies before making babies. Karen panics and quickly agrees that he is right and that there are other challenges beforehand. Patty interrupts them. A voice yells for everyone to be quiet, angrily asks whether Shiro is refusing and demands they make a baby immediately. The young man replies that this is an abuse of power. Stella and Anna arrive, and the little girl asks if the auction is over, to which Shiro says it is, and asks how the photos turned out. The little girl says she'd love to take a picture with them all. He agrees and says it's a great idea. The city had no streetlights, but that night lanterns cast a soft glow over the place. Ninorich was the city Iren had built from the ground up. Shiro lines up the shot to make sure everyone is in it when a wound suddenly draws his attention. Turning around, he asks who she is, and the woman says he should recognize her, her face dimly lit as he admits he doesn't remember and asks where they know each other from. Lights reveal the young woman as she approaches, and she tells Shiro he is a fool because she is his grandmother. It recalls what happened and how he had been absolutely certain his grandmother was alive and would attend the festival. Even after he became a merchant, his greatest wish was to find her again, and he only learned 2 months ago when Karen said the witch had come to the harvest festival the year before. At that time, he was attacked by insect monsters on a mission with Azure Flash. He met Patty Falulu, and that meeting became very precious to him. So many things happened, and before he knew it, the harvest festival had arrived. Just as Shiro was enjoying the festival with his friends, she showed up. Surprised, Shiro asks what the girl just said, and she replies that she is his grandmother. Aina asks the young man who the woman is, and the woman replies she is his grandmother. But a little girl says the woman looks too young to be a grandmother, so the girl moves closer to Shiro, flashes a peace sign, and asks Aina if she sees the resemblance, and Shiro recoils at the gesture and steps back, insisting she is not his grandmother. Angrily, he says his grandmother was over 80, a little old lady and not a young high-class girl, so it could not have been her. Karen timidly approaches, calls out to Arizu, and the witch recognizes her and asks how she is doing. The young man is stunned when the mayor tells the witch the festival was a great success thanks to Shiro, and Arizu watches and comments that her Shiro had helped. The witch says he became a good man. It was worth taking him to all those festivals when he was a child. Shiro asks whether she is really his grandmother, and she keeps insisting she is. The young man asks what her favorite movie is, and Arisa says it is Leaf, a Weapon. Insistent, he asks what her second favorite movie is. Arisu replies she could say Braveheart, but chooses Mad Max. Shiro asks who her favorite actor is, and she replies firmly that it's Mel Gibson. Arisu sighs and says his cautious nature makes her sad. She asked if he remembers when he was 7 what happened to his pants on the way home, and that she had to change him, and the young man says she didn't have to bring that up, and more importantly, he wondered where she had been all this time and why she had disappeared without saying anything, and Arisu looks at him tenderly, apologizes, and asks him not to be so sad. Patty appears concerned and asks who the human is because she senses a large amount of mana from her, and Karen proudly says she will introduce her. Introducing the living legend, the immortal witch Arisu Goamio. The nearby crowd hears this and starts moving in. Everyone wants to talk to the witch. Arisu scolds the mayor for speaking too loudly. Karen apologizes, and the witch says she's used to it but won't be able to enjoy the festival anymore. At that moment, a magic circle opens. A sword appears and someone points at it, saying it must be the legendary sword Mel Gibson, while Arisu apologizes and explains this was her reunion with her grandson. With a sword in hand, she wishes everyone sweet dreams. Soon everyone falls asleep. Shiro asks what she did, and the witch reassures him it was only an illusion. She moves in and hugs him. The young man pulls back and asks what she's doing. Arisu says they must leave now, though he doesn't understand, and when he asks what she means, the witch says it's obvious. Arisu opens a portal and pulls them toward it, saying they are going home, and the portal opens into another world as the young man screams in despair while they fall through the air. Before they hit the roof, Arisu uses her magic, and they pass through the house down to the ground floor. Shiro reels from the fall while Arisu stretches and says it feels so good to be home. Pouring a cup of tea for the witch, the young man watches her drink and recalls how mischievous he was as a child, but now serves tea so politely, and with an annoyed look he says he is 25 now, while the witch comments that he seems to have something to tell her. Shura says he does, of course, and that he has many questions, starting with who she is. Pouting, Marisu says she already told him she was a witch and that should have been enough. The young man says it still explains nothing and tells her to act her age. Shura says there was a big commotion in the family and asks why Arissa suddenly disappeared. Arissa says she cannot talk about it because witches have their own reasons. The young man complains that using that excuse is not fair. Someone asks if she used magic to appear younger. It seemed like the illusion she used earlier, but the witch says this is actually her real appearance. Shiro is shocked. Arisu explains her older appearance was caused by a magical transformation, since people in that world would find it strange if she did not age. Told to watch closely, Shiro sees the girl become an old woman and can hardly believe it. The witch asks whether he is now happy to see the grandmother he knew, and Shiro says he is not, only surprised and overwhelmed. Arisu says Shiro's grandfather told her to stay young forever for him, often called her cute and beautiful, and at night they would be affectionate, sitting close with flushed faces. Shiro interrupts her, saying he doesn't want to hear that about his family, much less about his grandparents. Arisu laughs and asks if he has any other questions, and the young man then shows her the portal in the closet. Arisa says that some time ago she and her husband were broke. They had spent a lot building the house and could not afford trips, so she decided to turn an empty room into a portal between that world and Rufalcio. Together they enjoyed all kinds of fun, such as Basta de Gente Elo.